of around 16 Celsius, but colder further north and feeling it in the wet and the windy weather here. Later on, as we go through tomorrow afternoon into the evening, a swathe of more persistent rain is going to affect parts of Devon, Cornwall and into South Wales as well. Looking ahead through the rest of the week, and the unsettled picture does remain. In fact, it is likely to turn very windy by the end of the week, but temperatures rising could get to 20 Celsius by Saturday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. Today, with a huge increase in illegal migrants crossing the Channel so far this year, one former Home Secretary says ID cards could hold the key to solving the small boats crisis. Is it a good idea? Next up, J.K. Rowling has challenged police to arrest her as the row over Scotland's controversial new hate crime laws rumbles on. And Rishi Sunak has today backed the Harry Potter author. The Prime Minister has waded in. Next up, some Tories are already planning for life without Mr Sunak. And one group is said to want to replace him with a Liz Truss-style leader, who isn't Liz Truss, apparently, if they lose the next general election. And with 10 million Brits feared to be addicted to junk food, is it time to treat it as seriously as alcohol or drugs? Or is it time just to stop scoffing so much grub? That's all coming in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Always an absolute pleasure to have your company. Got a big debate coming up later in the show. Already put this out on social media. Hundreds of you have responded. And the question today is this. Should the UK accept a Ukraine-style refugee plan, but for Palestinians? Well, over 60 charities, activists and lawyers reckon so, including Care for Calais. But what could possibly go wrong? Well, how come no Arab states have yet offered to do the same? Why should the burden fall on Britain? And recall, when a similar scheme was tried in the 1990s in Denmark, 64% of those refugees went on to commit crimes, and a third of their children also did. Should we do the same in Britain? Get in touch. All these your ways. gbviews@gbnews.com. Let's kick off the show with your news headlines from Sam Francis.
Martin, thanks very much, and a very good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's just gone 3 o'clock, and leading the news this hour, Israel has now admitted its forces were behind an unintended airstrike which killed 7 aid workers in Gaza, including a British national. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that officials are checking the incident thoroughly and is pledging to do everything to prevent it happening again. The group killed were travelling in 2 armoured cars, marked with the word Central Kitchen logo. The NGO has claimed the Israel Defence Forces carried out the attack despite coordinating their movements with the military. Those killed also include Palestinians and people from Poland and the US. Rishi Sunak says there must be a transparent investigation.
Shocked and saddened to hear the reported deaths of aid workers in Gaza. We're urgently working to confirm all the details, but my thoughts right now with their friends and family. They're doing fantastic work bringing alleviation to the suffering that many are experiencing in Gaza. They should be praised and commended for what they're doing. They need to be allowed to do that work unhindered, and it's incumbent on Israel to make sure that they can do that, and we're asking Israel to investigate what happened urgently, because clearly there are questions that need to be answered.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister is backing J.K. Rowling after she criticised a new hate crime law in Scotland. The law came into effect yesterday and bans hatred against people on certain grounds, but the author says that it risks silencing genuine debate on issues around gender and women's rights. Rishi Sunak has backed her concerns, saying that people should not be criminalised for stating simple facts on biology. Shadow Minister Pat McFadden told GB News earlier that Labour has no plans for any similar laws if it wins the next election.
We want proper enforcement of the anti-hate crime laws that are there and make sure that the right penalties are in place to protect people. We're not planning to legislate for new crimes in this area, and I don't think J.K. Rowling should be arrested.
Finland will observe a day of mourning tomorrow after a 12-year-old child was killed and 2 others were seriously wounded after a shooting that was carried out by another child of the same age at a primary school. It's understood a permit for the handgun belonged to a relative of the suspect. Police say the 12-year-old has admitted to carrying out the shooting, but the circumstances of the incident are not yet clear. The Finnish Prime Minister has said he is deeply shocked and that his thoughts are with the victims and their families. Adidas says that it will block any German football shirts featuring the number 44 amid concerns over the resemblance to the SS Nazi symbol. The new kits were launched last month ahead of Germany hosting the European Championships in June and July of this year. But a historian flagged similarities with the logo for SS, which was a Nazi paramilitary organisation. The country's Football Association says that it didn't support these similarities when the design was approved, but that it will now be changed. The government is facing criticism of its new plan to expand funded childcare, for working parents in the first week of it being rolled out across the country. Meeting parents in Hartlepool this morning, the Prime Minister rejected claims that nurseries can't cope with the increasing demand as a result of that new policy. Rishi Sunak says the package of support for families has been introduced in stages to give time for more places to be made available. Prices in shops are rising at the slowest rate for 2 years. That's according to new figures. In March, shop prices were up 1.3%, slowing from 2.5% the month before. The British Retail Consortium says that discounts on popular Easter treats and essentials, along with promotions on electricals and clothing, have helped to keep those prices down. And if you've ever opted for private mode when browsing on the internet search engine Google Chrome, well, you could have fallen victim to having your personal information stored. That's according to findings that have emerged from a court case. In a US ruling, Google will have to delete all private user data, which was not supposed to have been tracked. The US case was filed in 2020 in America, but the judgment today will apply to Google Chrome users here in the UK after the judge decided that there must be a limit on the tech giant's collection of personal information. That's the latest from the newsroom for now. You can sign up to GB News Alerts. Just scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, though, it's back to Martin in Westminster.
Thank you, Sam. Now, we've got absolutely loads to get through, so let's get cracking. Now, could ID cards be the way to finally solve the Channel migrant crisis? Well, it emerged yesterday. There's been an incredible 43% rise in the number of people illegally arriving in small boats this year. More than 5,000 migrants have crossed the Channel so far in 2024. But former Home Secretary Lord David Blunkett told The Times, "I would reintroduce the idea of ID cards, because what will happen with the Rwanda scheme is organised criminals will tell migrants simply not to claim asylum. They'll say, we'll get you across to the UK and then ring this number, we'll get you a job and accommodation, and then they'll disappear into the sub-economy. And that's the worst of all worlds, and they'll be exposed to mass exploitation, and then that'll affect other people by undercutting genuine workers and also involve modern slavery. And you can only solve that if you have a proper identity scheme. Now, that sounds, on paper, shows you papers, like common sense. Well, to discuss this, I'm now joined in the studio by the Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire. Kev, welcome to the studio. Absolute pleasure to see you. This is an old Labour idea. You must like it.
Yeah, it was a Conservative Party idea first. Labour opposed it, then Labour proposed it, and the Conservatives opposed it, and then finally scrapped David Blunkett's voluntary scheme. I understand why it appeals to some people superficially, but they want other people to show their papers, not themselves. And I think it over-promises what it can achieve. I think the money and the effort can be better spent. ID cards existed during the First World War, the Second World War. Second World War, they continued for 7 years, and they were scrapped because people got sick of bureaucrats and police officers asking them to show me your papers. It's essentially the basic right of you in Britain to leave home without any ID on you if you like. If you want to go out in your swimming trunks or a bikini, you can. You don't have to take your papers to show them when you're challenged.
But if the ID scheme this time around was specifically targeted to those arriving via small dinghies or illegally, then surely it has merit. I don't think this scheme is for everybody in Britain to show you papers. If you arrive and you're picked up by a Border Force patrol at our shores, you have to go through this system. You have to be processed anyway, you have to get a hotel for free. So this would be part of the system, and it would prevent exploitation, it would prevent slave labour. What's not to like?
Yeah, I'm not sure it would, because you would have to be able to enforce it. For instance, at the moment, if you're an employer or you're a landlord letting out, you have to check and show you've checked that somebody is entitled to be here and is here legally. If you don't, you can be fined. Very few fines. I just don't think that people will be producing cards like that. Look, people are getting on those boats. They're not going to flash a card. They're getting off the boats. They're not flashing a card to get off. They have to have ID. They give an official ID. You're required, if you're in that position, to have ID to access services when you're here. You can't stop people disappearing, unfortunately, unless you imprison them, and people do disappear into the economy. But I think the way to police the jobs market and accommodation is through landlords and employers, not demanding to see cards. And if we only gave cards to people coming on those small boats, 30,000 last year, 45,000 the year before, it's been 5,000 this year so far, that's a very small number of people in a country of 67 million. In fact, net migration was rising by 750,000.
But it would stop them working illegally.
Well, you can't work now if you're an asylum seeker.
But many do.
I actually think that's a mistake. I think we should, if your claim is being processed, instead of spending a fortune on putting people up in hotels and giving them 30, 40 quid a week to exist on.
That would be a people smuggler's dream. That would be top of the TikTok video. Come to Britain, guaranteed to work. So it's Kevin Maguire.
They're coming now, and it's a backhanded compliment. They want to come to Britain. They normally want to come to Britain, and we get far fewer people seeking asylum than other European countries, whether you're Spain, France, Italy, Germany. We're taking far fewer refugees, but it's a backhanded compliment. They want to come here. They normally want to come here because they have a family link, or they speak English, or, let's be honest, we've been there at some point, either with an empire or military intervention since, and they come to work not to claim benefits.
OK, I want to ask you about another thing as I've got you here, Kev. 60 charities, organisations, lawyers today have proposed the idea of a Ukrainian-style refugee settlement scheme for Palestinians. What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, well, you can see if you're looking at Gaza, where there's about 2 million people, there is nowhere safe in Gaza. If you look at Ukraine, there are large parts of Ukraine that are relatively safe now. That's not the case in the east, and I know you can still get attacks and keep, but it's relatively safe. And people opened their homes to welcome people from Ukraine, some of whom have gone back since. I think there'd be some people, if they wanted to open their homes to Palestinians from Gaza, why not? Well, because that is a humanitarian crisis. The UK government admits it's a humanitarian crisis. We've seen British aid workers.
But there's a massive difference between Ukraine and Palestine. For example, we're on the side of the Ukrainians in war. Presumably, Palestinians coming here might have a grievance with Britain because we've ostensibly backed Israel, and the scheme from Ukraine is women and children, because all the men had to stay behind and fight. So you must admit, if we don't have ID cards for people to come into the country from France, how on earth are we going to know the origin or the political leanings of those from Palestine? We've had numerous security advisors on this show before saying Hamas would welcome the chance to melt into the civilian population, but welcome into Britain.
Yeah, Hamas does not export violence to the wider world. Yes, there's a real issue with Israel, as we saw with the pogrom, the horrific slaughter of Jewish people on October the 7th, but not the wider world. And in fact, you'd have to apply for a visa, which has happened in Ukraine. You have to give all sorts of detailed personal information so you can be tracked.
So you'd welcome Palestinian refugees to Britain?
Yeah, I would. And I just wonder if the difference is that Palestinians tend to be Muslims. Not all of them, but they tend to be Muslims, while Ukrainians weren't. There's no doubt that in Britain, I'm afraid, there is a real Islamophobia, and it's pretty deep-rooted.
You think people's resistance to Palestinians who could be members of Hamas, for all we know, it's because of Islamophobia?
Hamas is different. But if you're just a Palestinian...
How do we know who they are? We'd have no idea who these Palestinians are. It would be impossible to judge.
Yeah, well, if you do it with women and children, I mean, Hamas is a pretty male-dominated organisation, the way it's structured in the hierarchy. Look, when you welcome people into your country, whether they're tourists, coming on business, coming as asylum seekers, coming as refugees, you never know 100%. That is true. But the vast majority of people who come to Britain are very law-abiding, want to make their life here and contribute enormously to our society, culture and economy.
Ken Maguire, great start to the show. Thank you very much for popping into the studio. Always appreciated. Now, GBNews believes the Foreign Office understands at least 2 British aid workers were killed by an airstrike in Gaza. Rishi Sunak says questions need to be answered after the horrific incident, and the Israel Defence Forces has expressed the deepest condolences to the families of 7 people who died last night. Well, joining me now is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. What's the latest on this horrific situation?
Well, the Foreign Office is still investigating how many British nationals may have been killed in this missile strike. It may be up to 3, but they believe, at least for now, that 2 British nationals have been killed. A confusing situation on the ground, and one that's deeply embarrassing, of course, for the Israeli military, who have come out now and admitted that this was an unintended missile strike that took place. This charity, World Central Kitchen, a US-based charity, has a good relationship with the Israeli government. They've been working with them closely in recent months in delivering vital aid supplies and food to people in Gaza, and have been most of the time, well, all of the time, according to the charity, liaising with the Israeli military to let them know exactly where they are to minimize the chance of any kind of mishap. However, the circumstances are now under investigation. We've heard from British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak about the news of British casualties, and he said he was shocked and saddened.
I'm shocked and saddened to hear the reported deaths of aid workers in Gaza. We're urgently working to confirm all the details, but my thoughts right now with their friends and family. They're doing fantastic work bringing alleviation to the suffering that many are experiencing in Gaza. They should be praised and commended for what they're doing. They need to be allowed to do that work unhindered, and it's incumbent on Israel to make sure that they can do that, and we're asking Israel to investigate what happened urgently, because clearly there are questions that need to be answered. You know, our view is long-standing that Israel has both the intention and the ability to comply with international humanitarian law. I've made that very clear to Prime Minister Netanyahu whenever I've spoken to him. There have been too many civilian deaths in Gaza. Of course, we want to see an immediate humanitarian pause so that we can get the hostages out and more aid into the region.
Well, one of the reasons why this is so deeply uncomfortable for the Israeli government and its military is because of the good relationship it has had with this charity and other charities that it's trying to actively encourage to take over a lot of the aid supplies in Gaza, because, of course, Israel is in a very difficult position with the UN aid agency in Gaza, UNRWA, who they have claimed of employing 2,000 members of Hamas, and for some of those employees to have been actively involved in the massacre on October the 7th. So Israel has been full of praise for these other charities and actively encouraging them. You could tell this by the Israeli military spokesman Daniel Hagari, and just how fulsome in his praise he was for this charity as he explained what happened.
We are committed to examining our operations thoroughly and transparently. For the last few months, the IDF has been working closely with the World Central Kitchen to assist them in fulfilling their noble mission of helping bring food and humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. WCK also came to help Israelis after the massacre of October 7th. They were one of the first NGOs here. The work of WCK is critical. They are the front lines of humanity. We will get to the bottom of this, and we will share our findings transparently.
So while this incident is being actively investigated now by the Israeli military, there is real concern about what this means for the continued aid supplies that are so vitally needed in Gaza, because both the charity at the centre of this tragedy, another US charity, have decided to suspend their operations in Gaza. An aid supply ship that was heading to the Gaza Strip has now turned round. So there will be urgent discussions between the Israelis and these charities to try to get this aid shipment back on course again to help the beleaguered people in this enclave.
Mark White, thank you very much for that update. As many as 3 British aid workers killed in Gaza. Thank you very much. Now, moving on, it's our biggest giveaway of the year so far. Your chance to win £10,000, a Greek cruise for 2, £10,000 in cash and a whole host of luxury travel gifts. Your 2025 holiday could be on us at GB News, and here's all the details that you need to enter.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for 2 worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, Rishi Sunak has backed J.K. Rowling after she criticised Scotland's controversial new hate crime laws. The Harry Potter author has challenged police there to arrest her. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
I like to call this one robbing Peter to pay Paul. The Labour Party have embarked on a journey that I can only describe as politics of envy. I think it's time we scrutinise their policies more closely and establish in our minds what a Labour government might mean to the education system. Sir Keir Starmer and his party have for far too long capitalised on the abject failure of the Conservatives and haven't really had to explain themselves. But as part of their manifesto, Labour intend to charge VAT at 20% on private schools because I suspect they think that people who send their kids there will stump up the cash no matter what, and that these people have money. They will then use this money, Labour, to fund state schools. Basically, they will rob Peter to pay Paul. But what I believe they've failed to realise, I'm not sure whether they've factored this in, is that many people who send their kids to private schools do so at great sacrifice and are in fact paying twice into the education system. I spent my first year of secondary education in a state school. I'll be honest, when I started I was at the top of the class, but by the end of the year I was near the bottom. But then my dad got promoted to a post on Wall Street in the States. My parents sent me to a private boarding school in the UK run by nuns, and my family moved to America. Thank God for the opportunity I was given to go private. At boarding school I grew in confidence, and I'm here now because of it. My father's work, NatWest, and a loan my dad took out paid for my private education. We were nowhere near as rich as some of the kids there, but there are also many children, I would say at least half, whose parents were busting a gut to send them there. It is clear that the state education system is failing, but rather than robbing Peter to pay Paul, surely it would be better for the party to improve the state system without destroying the private sector.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
I'm Nana Aquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:25. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, later in the show, I'll tell you why residents have declared war on British holiday makers who they say only drink cheap beer, lay in the sun and eat low-quality food. When do I go? Now to the ongoing row about Scotland's controversial new hate crime legislation. Rishi Sunak has backed J.K. Rowling after she criticised the new law, and the Harry Potter author has appeared to challenge police to arrest her if her social media posts are against the new laws. Well, Rowling is a fierce critic of the Scottish Government's stance, of course, on transgender rights. J.K. Rowling repeated her views in a lengthy post on X, formerly known as Twitter, which ended with the comment, "I'm currently out of the country, but if what I've written here qualifies as an offence under the terms of the new Act, then I look forward to being arrested when I return to the birthplace of the Scottish Enlightenment." Tongue firmly in cheek. Now, joining me now to discuss this is our reporter in Scotland, Tony Maguire. Tony, welcome to the show. Tony, it all kicked off yesterday when the laws came in on April Fool's Day of all days, but now the laughter has subsided. Things getting fruity with J.K. Rowling.
Yes, indeed. Certainly, J.K. Rowling has come out quite strong on Twitter yesterday, or X, obviously, formerly known as Twitter. But, you know, that 11-page or that 11-post message that she put out, naming various high-profile transgender women across Scotland and the various ways that she was almost purposefully misgendering them, you know, as some are accusing her of. But certainly, you know, I think she probably knows herself that she's okay. She's not going to get arrested. You know, the Equality Network put out quite a lengthy, interesting post, kind of delving deep into what actually constitutes a hate crime and what police are going to be sifting through these reports for, and that is indeed things that make people feel concerned for their safety, concerned for their safety in public places, be it in groups or whatever. Now, today has been quite interesting. We've seen how fast this public discourse has moved. Yesterday, there was a lot of anger in those images outside Holyrood. Today, I think everyone's kind of left with a bit of confusion. I spoke to a lot of the general public earlier on just to get, you know, a sense of primarily how they felt about the most extreme scenario, about, you know, conversations around the dinner table or the living room, and how they felt about police actually looking into them and investigating things said in their own homes.
I don't think so. I think, quite honestly, the police have got enough to do. I think at this moment in time, they don't even have enough time to investigate more serious crimes like burglaries, etc. So I think they've got enough to do, and I think it's just maybe a wee bit too far.
Oh, I definitely think it is, yes. We wouldn't like to be censored in our own home.
I'm going to get a T-shirt printed which says the 4 most dangerous words in Scotland. What do you think? That's it.
I think it's going to take too much time for the police to go and try and do anything with that. To me, it's a waste of time. But that's just me.
Just exactly the same opinion. No, I don't think so. No. It's too time consuming. The police have got far too many things to be getting on with.
So obviously today's big story was that Rishi Sunak, well, he came out in support of free speech and J.K. Rowling's stance. An easy win for the Conservatives, what with all Scottish Labour and SNP MSPs voting for the bill. But, you know, this conversation is far from over up here.
Tony Maguire, thanks for that update live from Edinburgh. And joining me now is the former senior investigating officer at the Metropolitan Police, Simon Harding. Simon, welcome to the show. We heard from a cross-section of the public up in Scotland who are quite simply saying there's no time for this. 6% of burglaries are currently solved. Why on earth is a government inventing new crimes when it's failing to solve existing crimes?
Well, yeah, and it's putting a lot of pressure again on the police, isn't it? I mean, you saw there that one member of the public said it's confusing enough. So what makes that any difference to a police officer who lands on their desk where somebody's, you know, feelings are, you know, in this way, that the police officer's got to make their own subjective test against what's being said, you know, especially around what J.K. Rowling was talking about, misgendering. I mean, you know, we are sort of talking about, you know, the ability to freedom of speech and you know, people putting their opinion across about something. And if that goes into our living rooms as well, obviously around a dinner table, then that really is an intrusion that the police will feel incredibly uncomfortable about as well, I'm sure. And you know, in my opinion as well, we'll want to deal with those other things which the public hold as their priorities, you know, in Scotland, especially, you know, like burglary and things like that. So I think it is very confusing, but it also is very subjective to the officer dealing with it or the police force in an area. You know, is there going to be consistency around decision making? All that sort of thing is going to come out and be very, you know, testing for the police at this time.
And Simon, we often hear that some police officers, they like this new authority that this kind of law gives them. But I'm assuming the vast majority of rank and file police officers just think, oh, my goodness, I'm expected to go around policing people's tweets. They must think it's a complete headache and a nightmare for them operationally.
Well, it is, absolutely. And it's an impossible task, isn't it, really? When you think how many millions of tweets and messages and different forums that we have on the internet where people are going to put their opinion across, their own personal opinion, and we're almost saying in that area of the UK that we're going to take that opinion away from you. You're not allowed to have that opinion anymore. And I think police officers, I said, will feel very uncomfortable. But the other part of this really is as well is that it's absolutely right to have hate crimes in terms of monitoring them, and the police have said that they want to monitor, and they should do, because you want to see crime patterns emerge against certain ethnicities or groups in society to make sure that you can deal with that. But this is going to make it a huge area of confusion for everybody to understand. Do I need to investigate this, and what if I say this one does need investigating, but this one doesn't? I think it's going to be very, very confusing from now on.
I think you nailed it perfectly there, Simon Harding. Time and time again, the public say we want more bobbies on the beat, and now we're policing tweets instead of policing the streets. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Now, there's lots more still to come before 4 o'clock, and I'll discuss claims that 10 million Brits are allegedly addicted to junk food as the obesity crisis costs the NHS a staggering £15 billion every single year. Are we addicted, or should we just eat less cake? But first, here's your latest news headlines with Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon from the newsroom. The headlines just after 3:30. Israel has now admitted its forces were behind the unintended killing of 7 aid workers in Gaza, including 3 British citizens. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says officials are now checking the incident thoroughly following international calls for a full investigation. The group killed were travelling in 2 armoured cars marked with the World Central Kitchen logo. That NGO claims the attack was carried out despite them coordinating their movements with the military. Those killed also include Palestinians and people from Australia, Poland and the US. Israel's defence minister says a joint situation room will now be opened with international groups to facilitate the delivery of aid with the military. A 12-year-old child has been killed and 2 other children are in a serious condition after a shooting carried out by another child at a primary school in Finland. It's understood the permit for that handgun belonging to the child was actually of the relative of the suspect. Police say the 12-year-old has admitted to carrying out the shooting, but the circumstances are not yet clear. The Prime Minister is backing J.K. Rowling after she criticised a new hate crime law in Scotland. It came into effect yesterday and bans hatred against people on certain grounds. But the author says it risks silencing genuine debate on issues around gender and women's rights. Rishi Sunak backs those concerns, saying that people should not be criminalised for stating simple facts on biology. And the government is facing criticism of its new plan to expand funded childcare for working parents in the first week of it being rolled out across England. Meeting parents in Hartlepool this morning, the Prime Minister rejected claims that nurseries can't cope with increasing demand as a result of that new policy. Rishi Sunak says the package of support for families has been introduced in stages to give time for more places to be made available. That's the latest from the newsroom. Polly Middlehurst will be up next at 4 o'clock with the latest headlines. In the meantime, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosland Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a look at the markets this afternoon. The pound will buy you $1.2570 and €1.1670. The price of gold is £1,808.51 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is currently at 7,946 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Stam. Now we're still waiting to find out when the next general election will be, but Tories are already looking ahead to how they'll react to a defeat. It's claimed one group wants to install a Liz Truss-style candidate, who apparently isn't Liz Truss, to replace Rishi Sunak if or when they lose power. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Let's go to Scotland and west of Perth, the northbound M90. Now at the Broxton roundabout, that's the turn off for the A9 junction 12. Still a lane shut for a multi-vehicle collision. Big queues heading back towards Craigend at junction 10. Now the southbound M3, Lightwater junction 3, down to Camberley at 4. Still seeing a couple of miles worth of queues. 3 lanes are coned off. It's due to a lorry fire. Clockwise M25, Kings Langley, junction 20 towards the M1 at junction 21 queuing, 2 lanes shut, that's due to a collision there. And delays on London Northwestern trains and Avanti West Coast of up to 80 minutes, and some cancellations between Watford Junction and London Euston this afternoon. And for now, you're right up to date.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
He's a genius. We know he's one of the few geniuses in the world. We have Mozart, we have perhaps Leonardo da Vinci. He's a genius. Of course, he's worth studying.
But Chris, did they not think that Ben Jonson wrote some of his works?
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Some people say that. There's lots of people out there who will question who wrote the plays. What's really important, of course, is the quality of the writing. And can I just add, I have some sympathy for my opponent in this debate, because I'm afraid he's going to have to justify something which many people will disagree with. But good luck to him. But I think we all know Shakespeare was a genius. I'm sure my
let's
friend
hear from Ryan.
Well.
This is Ryan Mark Parsons, who's a former star of The Apprentice. Tell us more, Ryan.
Well, I agree with the other guests. I'm not denying Shakespeare's cultural relevance and significance in history. I mean, I admire Shakespeare. But I guess in terms of his relevance, if you were to define relevance, the Oxford Dictionary says it's appropriate to the time, context and circumstances. And I think there's an argument to be had about whether Shakespeare is relevant in 2024. Let's just look at the language that he uses. It's extremely archaic. It's almost elitist, because you have to have studied his works in order to understand the plays in which he wrote. So
I just want to tear my hair out when you say that. I mean,
well, it's true.
He survives for 500 years and then the Gen Zers chuck it up the wall. And you say it's not relevant.
Oh, he's more relevant than ever, because what Shakespeare does tells us about human nature. The human nature in the 16th century, or the 17th century, it was no different from today. You know, if you're looking at Vladimir Putin's headlines today, well, read Julius Caesar. It's just the language can be difficult, but that's good, because we need to stretch children. We need to present children with things which challenge them. Don't always make life easier for children. Absolutely. No, make them stretch them a little bit.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:39. It's your time. I'm Martin Daubney, and this is GB News. Now, later in this show, we'll discuss another woke rebrand of a flag, and this time, Team GB's Union Jack has turned pink and purple on a supporters' flag for this year's Olympics. Is it a union joke? Now, Rishi Sunak has defended the government's flagship childcare policy and dismissed concerns over whether the nursery sector has enough places and staff to even cope with it. And the Prime Minister visited a nursery in Hartlepool this morning to mark the first day when families in England benefited from 15 hours of taxpayer-funded care for 2-year-olds. And I'm joined now by GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure to see you. Childcare, something, of course, many voters very, very anxious about. It's expensive. It's very, very tough to get a space for your kid in the first place. I know that from bitter experience. Will this new scheme make things any easier for beleaguered parents?
Well, it certainly will if the places are available. I think it's worth saying that this is, as the government says, a very, very big deal indeed, because as of now, working parents qualify for 15 hours a week for 2-year-olds and above. That will be extended to babies from 9 months old from September. By next September, you'll be able to get 30 hours free childcare for children from 9 months old right through until they start school if you're a working parent. Now, the government's saying that's going to save families up to £6,900 a year. So a huge amount of money. However, Labour Party and lots of nursery providers are saying that this has not been properly funded and that there simply are not the places available. Now, the government's making a big noise about you can sign on and get this code to entitle you to this free care. They're saying they're expecting 150,000 people to activate this within the next few days. But getting the code is one thing, but actually securing that place at a nursery or childcare provider near you is quite another, because plenty of nurseries saying that it's not being properly funded, that they're already operating at a loss on the places that they are giving, and many of them are full, and many of them are also saying that they're thinking they may go out of business in the next year. Now, Rishi Sunak says, basically, trust me, it's all going to be OK. Labour Party says it's going to be a disaster. We won't have very long to find out what actually happens.
And Catherine, you know, when this came in the first time round in 2015, David Cameron gave 30 hours of free childcare. That's where my first nipper went to nursery. What happened was the prices went through the roof. You couldn't get a space anyway because everybody was competing for a limited resource. I digress. Call me a cynic. Moving on. The Conservative Party are already looking forward to their next leader after their impending defeat, if you believe them, at any rate, the Popcons, the Popular Conservatives, saying a Liz Truss-style leader who, by the sounds of it, isn't Liz Truss.
Exactly. Well, I think Liz Truss, even Liz Truss, who's not particularly troubled by self-doubt, must realise that she's not going to be elected to lead the Conservatives after she lasted all of 7 weeks as Prime Minister. But yes, some of her supporters, Mark Littlewood, who used to lead the Institute of Economic Affairs, a big fan of Liz Truss, and others are plotting to get somebody who is of a free market libertarian bent to lead the Conservatives after their presumed loss at the next general election. They're thinking possibly that they might like former Home Secretary Priti Patel, who has been going a little bit under the radar of late, but making friends and quietly building support. So let's see what happens. But of course, they haven't lost the next election yet. And it's not particularly helpful, given that people tend not to vote for divided parties, for this to be coming out now, because rather than plotting who's going to be in charge after they lose the next election, if indeed they do, it might be more helpful to try to put forward something of a united front. That's something that Lord Hague, of course, a big supporter of Rishi Sunak, Rishi Sunak took what used to be Lord Hague's seat, is saying, basically, let's focus on coming together and fighting the election and showing people around in the country what we're doing right and what we can offer them, rather than worrying about what comes afterwards.
Catherine Forster, great stuff. And in fact, we'll have Mark Littlewood of the Popular Conservatives, the head honcho, on the show in the 5 o'clock hour. And the funny thing about this, Catherine, it's going to take 70 Conservative MPs to get this off the ground. Well, there might be only left with 80 after the next general election. Lots of questions to ask Catherine Forster. Always a pleasure and never a chore. Now, Britain's obesity crisis is so bad that some doctors want food addiction to be classed as dangerous as alcohol and drugs, or just eat less cake. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Across some central southern parts there will be a bit of sunshine tomorrow, but otherwise it's looking pretty wet and there's some rain to come tonight as well. That's because we have an area of low pressure to the southwest of us and that is driving a feature northwards as we go through the rest of today. So ending the day across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England on a mostly dry note, but rain in the southwest will feed its way across much of England, Wales and into Northern Ireland overnight, with some persistent rain continuing across eastern parts of Scotland, bringing a bit of hill snow over the higher ground here. Temperatures not dropping much for many of us because of the unsettled weather, although a touch of frost is possible across the far north of Scotland. Many areas then waking up tomorrow morning to a pretty wet start and staying wet across northern parts with some further, at times heavy and persistent rain. Further south though, a drier picture. Yes, there will be a few showers around, but we should also see some bright or sunny spells developing. In any sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs of around 16 Celsius, but colder further north and feeling it in the wet and the windy weather here. Later on, as we go through tomorrow afternoon into the evening, a swathe of more persistent rain is going to affect parts of Devon, Cornwall and into South Wales as well. Looking ahead through the rest of the week, and the unsettled picture does remain. In fact, it is likely to turn very windy by the end of the week, but temperatures rising could get to 20 Celsius by Saturday. Bye-bye.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Dubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, and let's bring you some breaking news now. And 3 British nationals were killed in yesterday's unintended Israeli airstrike in Gaza, and that's according to the charity the volunteers worked for. World Central Kitchen confirmed 7 of its workers were killed on Monday night when their car was struck by a missile in Deir al-Balah in Gaza. In addition to the 3 Britons, 8 workers from Poland, Australia and Palestine were killed, along with a dual US and Canadian citizen. Now, Britain's obesity crisis is now so bad that doctors are pushing for food addiction to be classed as dangerous as drink and drugs. Reports suggest more than 10 million Brits are feared to be hooked on junk food. The cost of obesity to the UK is said to be £58 billion every single year. And joining me now to discuss this is the former presenter of Fat Families and friend of the show, the deliciously outspoken Steve Miller. Steve, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. Are we really addicted to fast food, or simply have no self-control or agency?
Nice intro, and good to be on your plate.
What I would say is that, you know, there are some people that do potentially theoretically have an addiction, but the vast majority of people do not have an addiction. We love throwing this word around. They are falling into bad habits. You know, if people had an addiction, they'd be smashing down doors to grab the chocolate bars. I mean, you have a real dependency. I think it's not addiction. It's definitely more about bad habits. And frankly, in the UK, and I know some people don't like me saying this sort of stuff, but we need a good kick up the backside, actually. And we need to start waking up and thinking about what we're putting in the trolley. And yes, it can be a challenge. I'm not saying it's you know, it's easy peasy, but pudding and pie, use the pun. But you know, there is always something we can do about it. So I guess my message is this: is that start taking responsibility, start being more consciously aware of what you're doing. Do not ditch junk totally. Always have a little bit of what you fancy, but moderate so you live in 80-20. And, you know, I do relate to this because there was a time when I would go to the supermarket, and I tell you what, I used to get home when I was much fatter than I am now. And I would get home and I'd literally look in the mirror and I'd say to myself, well, this little piggy went to market. Seriously, because I would just pile it all in the trolley, all the cake and the bickies and all of that sort of stuff.
You know, what's interesting about this, Steve, is that they're now pushing for, they're saying 20% of adults are addicted to ultra-processed fat foods, and they're pushing for an international food addiction consensus conference. And, of course, they want World Health Organization buy-in. Steve, am I cynically thinking here that if we start pathologising things, then what will happen is they'll be medicalised? The next thing you know, we'll all be on fat jabs, and this will be a huge, big pharma industry once again going into medicines, pills, potions and jabs rather than just saying take control.
Oh, yeah, we'll all be like lab rats, literally lardy lab rats. That's what we'll become if we're not careful. Oh, and it is, you're right to raise this because it does give people an excuse, doesn't it? You know, oh, I'm an addict. No, you're not. You've just fallen into bad habits. Pull yourself together. We need a bit more of that message in the UK, as well as an arm around the shoulder as well. I get all of that. But yes, excuses are very calorific. So what I say to people as well is, are you actually making too many excuses? Isn't it time that you move forward and, you know, just did a little bit of something for yourself? And recognize, actually, we do need to recognize that this is a mindset and motivation challenge for people. People know what to eat to be slim. You know, all of this nutrition talk about, oh, how many, you know, protein in this and carbs in that. No, that's all codswallop now. It's all in the head. So what we've got to do, when I talk about the head, what that also means is we have to be quite tough about it, strong about it, as well as being very kind to ourselves along the way, telling ourselves that, yes, we are too gorgeous to be fat, and it's time to sort it out. And it's time in the UK we have that sort of message. Got a bit more blunt about it like the Japanese do.
Supers of a svelte Steve Miller, always with full fat opinions. Thank you very much for coming on the show, Steve. Always an absolute pleasure. Now, I've got a couple of quick emails to get through before the end of the hour. We asked about ID cards. Is that the answer for the fact we can't control our borders? And we've had hundreds of emails on this, as well as should we have a Palestine refugee scheme later on that. But first, on ID cards, Helen says this: make it voluntary for everybody, but if you opt out, then you cannot qualify for benefits or NHS services. Genuine asylum seekers will soon opt in, mark my words. Criminals and economic migrants will opt out. Dave says this quickly: ID cards should be essential. Most of the time you would not have to show it, but it will stop all the corruption in voting and workforce. Police checks, I am sure most in this country would willingly accept them. Thank you very much for those emails. Plenty of those more to come after this, because almost 60 groups are calling for Palestinian refugees in Gaza with family in this country to be allowed to move to the UK. Is that a good idea? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now it's your weather with Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Across some central southern parts there will be a bit of sunshine tomorrow, but otherwise it's looking pretty wet and there's some rain to come tonight as well. That's because we have an area of low pressure to the southwest of us, and that is driving a feature northwards as we go through the rest of today. So ending the day across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England on a mostly dry note, but rain in the southwest will feed its way across much of England, Wales and into Northern Ireland overnight, with some persistent rain continuing across eastern parts of Scotland, bringing a bit of hill snow over the higher ground here. Temperatures not dropping much for many of us because of the unsettled weather, although a touch of frost is possible across the far north of Scotland. Many areas then waking up tomorrow morning to a pretty wet start and staying wet across northern parts with some further, at times heavy and persistent rain. Further south though, a drier picture. Yes, there will be a few showers around, but we should also see some bright or sunny spells developing. In any sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs of around 16 Celsius, but colder further north and feeling it in the wet and the windy weather here. Later on, as we go through tomorrow afternoon into the evening, a swathe of more persistent rain is going to affect parts of Devon, Cornwall and into South Wales as well. Looking ahead through the rest of the week, and the unsettled picture does remain. In fact, it is likely to turn very windy by the end of the week, but temperatures rising could get to 20 Celsius by Saturday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's some congestion southbound down the western bypass, the A1. Now it's part blocked, junction 69 to 67. That's the Dunstan interchange down towards the Coalhouse interchange. That's all due to a breakdown. Southbound M1 before Nottingham South, junction 24, stop-start. Lane 1 is out, an obstruction there is causing queues. Queuing 2 clockwise M25. Now Kings Langley, junction 20 towards junction 21. The outside lane's combed off. A queue back towards 17 Maple Cross. That's due to a collision. And queuing southbound for the M3, 2 lanes shut. Lightwater junction 3, that's through towards Camberley at 4. It's queuing for a couple of miles before junction 3. There's a lorry fire there and congestion is starting to build. And for now, that's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for 2. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. In today's show, I get reaction to calls for Palestinians in Gaza to be allowed to move to the UK if they've got family here. What could possibly go wrong with that? We'll have a counter-terror expert discussing that soon. And J.K. Rowling has challenged police to arrest her as the row over Scotland's controversial new hate crime laws introduced on April the 1st rumbles on. And Rishi Sunak has today backed the Harry Potter author. Some Tories are already planning for life without Mr. Sunak. One group is said to want to replace him with a Liz Truss-style leader who apparently isn't Liz Truss. And another day, another row about a flag being rebranded. This time, Team GB has changed the Union Jack. It now contains shades of pink and purple. Is it a Union joke? That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. It's always an absolute pleasure to have your company. Right after the news, we've got the big debate of today. Should we adopt a Ukrainian-style refugee resettlement plan, but for Palestinians? 60 charities, organisations, lawyers and activists think that's a good idea. I'll speak to a counter-terrorism expert who says it might not be the best solution. After all, no Arabian countries are prepared to take them. Why should we? Is that a problem waiting to happen? You've got time to get your views across. Still time, email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. But first, let's kick off this hour with your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom is that Israel has admitted its forces were behind what's being described as an unintended killing of 7 aid workers in Gaza, including 3 British nationals. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, says officials are now checking the incident thoroughly amid international calls for a full investigation. The group killed were travelling in 2 armoured cars marked with the World Central Kitchen logo. The aid group claims the attack was carried out despite them coordinating their movements with the Israeli military. In a statement released in the last few minutes, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says international law must be upheld and humanitarian workers must be protected. And speaking earlier, Rishi Sunak called for a full investigation.
Shocked and saddened to hear the reported deaths of aid workers in Gaza. We're urgently working to confirm all the details, but my thoughts right now with their friends and family. They're doing fantastic work, bringing alleviation to the suffering that many are experiencing in Gaza. They should be praised and commended for what they're doing. They need to be allowed to do that work unhindered, and it's incumbent on Israel to make sure that they can do that, and we're asking Israel to investigate what happened urgently, because clearly there are questions that need to be answered.
Well, the Prime Minister is backing the Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling after she criticised a new hate crime law that's come into being in Scotland. The law was introduced yesterday and seeks to ban hatred against people on certain grounds. But the author says it risks silencing genuine debate on issues around gender, as well as ignoring the rights of women and girls. Rishi Sunak has backed her concerns, saying that people shouldn't be criminalised for stating simple facts on biology. Shadow Minister Pat McFadden told GB News this morning that Labour has no plans to introduce similar laws.
We want proper enforcement of the anti-hate crime laws that are there and make sure that the right penalties are in place to protect people. We're not planning to legislate for new crimes in this area, and I don't think J.K. Rowling should be arrested.
Pat McFadden. Well, let's turn our attentions to Finland now, where the country will observe a day of mourning tomorrow after a 12-year-old girl was killed and 2 others were seriously wounded in a shooting that was carried out by another child at a primary school north of Helsinki. It's understood a permit for the handgun that was used belonged to a relative of the suspect, and police are saying the 12-year-old suspect has admitted carrying out the shooting, but the circumstances surrounding what exactly happened are not yet clear. The sports group Adidas says it will redesign its German football shirts featuring the number 44 amid concerns over a resemblance to the SS Nazi symbol. The new kits were launched last month ahead of Germany hosting the European Championship, but a historian flagged similarities with the logo for the SS, which was, of course, a Nazi paramilitary organisation. The country's football association says it didn't spot the similarities when the design was initially approved, but it will now be changed. The government's faced some criticism today of its new plan to expand funded childcare for working parents on the first week of it being rolled out across England. Meeting parents in Hartlepool this morning, the Prime Minister had to reject claims that nurseries can't cope with increasing demand as a result of his new policy. Rishi Sunak said the package of support for families has been introduced in stages to give more time for places to be made available at nurseries. Prices in shops are rising at the slowest rate for 2 years. That's according to new figures out today. In March, shop prices were up 1.3%. That's slowing from 2.5% in February. The British Retail Consortium says discounts on popular Easter treats and essentials, as well as promotions on electricals and clothing, have helped keep those prices down. Now, if you have ever gone incognito while using the internet on Google's Chrome browser, your private information still may have been stored by the tech giant. But now, thanks to a US court ruling, Google will be forced to delete all private user data, which was not supposed to have been tracked. And despite the case being filed in the US, the judgment will also apply internationally, including here in the UK. Google dismissed the merits of the case, saying that it involved only old technical data that was never associated with individuals. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan that QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now we start with calls for Palestinian refugees in Gaza with family in this country to be allowed to move to the UK. Almost 60 groups, including the Refugee Council and Care for Calais, want Home Secretary James Cleverly to start a Ukraine-style visa scheme. Around 174,000 Ukrainian refugees moved to the UK after Russia's invasion in February 2022. And authorities in Gaza say more than 30,000 people have been killed in the territory since Hamas attacked Israel on the 7th of October. Well, joining me now to discuss this is former senior military intelligence officer Philip Ingram. Philip, welcome to the show. We have no idea who currently comes into Britain over the Channel. We know full well that there is a war in Gaza. It's a war that ostensibly Britain has taken the opposing side on by backing Israel. We know that in 1992, when 321 Palestinian refugees were taken to Denmark, 64% of them went on to have criminal records. What could possibly go wrong, Philip, with bringing these people to Britain?
Well, with Hamas inexorably integrated into the population, it would be very difficult to identify who is Hamas and who isn't Hamas. And that's the reason why this argument and this cry is, it's academic completely, because the Palestinian people inside Gaza can't get out. They can't get out because the Egyptians aren't letting them across the border because of Hamas's links to the Muslim Brotherhood, and Egypt doesn't want Palestinian refugees in its country. No other Arab country wants Palestinian refugees in there because of their historical links into causing disruption. And then the only other ways that they could potentially get out is through Israel. And Israel's not going to let Palestinians come out through their borders to go elsewhere. So, it's great, these organizations saying we should allow this. They're doing it merely to make noise.
Yeah, and the Ukrainian scheme, of course, is very, very different. We were fighting on the same side. We culturally have a lot in common. And let's not forget, it was only women and children, because the men, of course, of conscription age at least, had to remain behind to fight. The truth of the matter is that we would have absolutely no clue who we were letting into the country. And it's absolutely within the realms of possibility that Hamas would specifically and deliberately place individuals within this civilian group to try and cause us harm, surely?
Oh, 100% they'd try and do that. And Hamas would stop lots of legitimate individuals wanting to get out. That is, if those individuals have got the paperwork that would need to be able to prove that they've got these links and everything else. And of course, we've got no consular access into Gaza. So again, yeah, it's great these groups making all these calls and causing all this noise, but nobody's thought it through. There's no practical solution to it whatsoever. The situations are completely different, and the threat to the UK by allowing people in who we cannot necessarily confirm exactly who they are is too great, far too great.
Philip, we had Kevin Maguire in from the Mirror earlier on. He was saying, well, why not have an identical scheme where women and children are allowed if we're concerned about Hamas military-aged men, as it were? But does that still carry risks? I mean, terrorists come in all shapes and sizes, don't they?
Yeah, we've got, look at Shamima Begum, who went off to join ISIS, one of the most horrible terrorist organizations that there is in the world. Women can equally be members of terror organizations and carry out things, but it's the practicalities of it. Hamas won't let the people out. Egypt won't let the people into Egypt to be processed. Israel won't let the people into Israel to be processed. And we've got no consular access into Gaza whatsoever. So there's no way, there's no mechanism in place at the moment for a visa scheme to be put in place, even if it were justified in any way, shape or form. So it's completely different to Ukraine. It's completely different to anything else that's there. Impractical, and it's just making noise for noise's sake.
And Philip, we've had hundreds and hundreds of emails, and the most common one that we're having is one from Adam Brooks, friend of the show. No, there's plenty of Middle Eastern countries surrounding them, not our place, we have no room. But of course, Philip, historically, we've seen Palestinian refugees, for example, going into the Lebanon, and that led to a 15-year civil war.
Well, it did, and across the whole of the Middle East, we've got large Palestinian populations in the West Bank, in Israel, which cause Israel a security problem. But that's partially stirred by the more extreme elements of the Israeli Jewish community taking over land by force in places. But of course, the Palestinian Authority had a civil war which lasted almost a week with Hamas, whenever Hamas took over the Gaza Strip. So there's issues amongst the Palestinian people. None of the other Arab countries want. Even Lebanon, with your Lebanese Hezbollah, would not necessarily want all of the Palestinian people to go up there. They've got their own problems. But Egypt has got capacity, has got space, will not have them. Jordan is one of the countries that's most closely linked to Palestine, and the people have similar backgrounds. Jordan doesn't want them, and none of the other Arab countries do. So this call for the UK to take on more and more individuals, or for other countries in Europe who are dealing with massive crisis of movement of people anyway, is just out there to create noise and try and create headlines.
Superb. Thanks for joining us on the show. And that's former senior military intelligence officer Philip Ingram, MBE. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Now, 3 British aid workers have been killed after an Israeli airstrike in Gaza. Rishi Sunak says questions need to be answered after the horrific incident. And the Israel Defence Forces has expressed the deepest condolences to the families of 7 people who died last night. Well, joining me now for a full update on this is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. A tragic situation. What's the latest?
Well, this is the charity World Central Kitchen, who've been working in Gaza for quite a number of months now and have delivered in that time 42 million meals to people in Gaza. Absolutely vital at the moment, their work in Gaza. But that's been suspended now in the wake of this terrible tragedy last night. The Israeli military have admitted that they were behind the missile strike. They say it was unintended. The charities say that they had liaised, as they always do, with the Israeli military to inform them of the route they were taking down the coastal route from central Gaza, after having picked up part of 100 tons of aid supplies that they were about to distribute to Gaza's citizens. And this is very deeply uncomfortable for the Israeli government and the Israeli military, because they have a good working relationship with this particular charity. They have been encouraging this charity to do more in Gaza because of a complete breakdown in relationship between the Israeli government and the UN aid agency, UNRWA, based in Gaza, who the Israelis have accused of employing some 2,000 members of Hamas, and indeed employing members of Hamas who were actively involved in the attacks on the 7th of October. So since then, the Israelis have been encouraging other charities, other organisations to come in and to help the Gazan citizens. This is what Daniel Hagari, the Israeli military spokesman, said, and you can tell just how uncomfortable he was and how fulsome in his praise he is of this particular charity.
We are committed to examining our operations thoroughly and transparently. For the last few months, the IDF has been working closely with the World Central Kitchen to assist them in fulfilling their noble mission of helping bring food and humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. WCK also came to help Israelis after the massacre of October 7th. They were one of the first NGOs here. The work of WCK is critical. They are the front lines of humanity. We will get to the bottom of this, and we will share our findings transparently.
So even though this charity was actively liaising with the Israeli military and the route it was taking was through what is termed a deconflicted zone, there is nothing truly deconflicted in Gaza. It is an active war zone throughout, and real dangers for these charities and aid workers in that area. In fact, it is the most dangerous place in the world for aid workers, with now more than 200 of those aid workers killed since the war began.
Thanks for that update, Mark White. 3 British aid workers killed in Gaza. Thank you very much. Now, you may have booked a family holiday for this year, but what about for next year? Well, you could win a bespoke Greek cruise for 2 in our brand new giveaway. Not only that, but 10 grand in cold, hard cash and a luxury travel gift package too. It's our biggest giveaway so far, and here's how you could win this Greek gift.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for 2. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Great stuff, fill your boots. Now, shop price inflation is at its lowest rate for more than 2 years. Is the cost of living crisis finally, mercifully coming to an end? I'll discuss that soon with Liam Halligan. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
The Guardian's not happy, everybody, because one of their headline stories today was about a private members club that is for gentlemen only, the Garrick Club I refer to in London. There's accusations now, Quinton, that it's all the kind of upper echelons of society, all the powerful...
It's a cabal of important, powerful people who are running the country.
And I thought to myself, when I heard descriptions like that, I bet Quinton Letts is somehow involved. Are you?
I've been to the Garrick a few times.
Why can't women be members?
Because it's a gents' club. My daughter, one of my daughters, is a member of an all-women's club called the University Women's Club, and they don't allow blokes in. It's an outrage. No, it's not. It's a free country.
I mean, it's archaic and it needs to change.
What is?
You know, is my view. The fact that the Garrick doesn't admit women members. There are lots of these members clubs, you know, across London, probably in other parts in the country as well. And you know, you have to pay for membership, so it is well-to-do members of society that go. I've nothing against them existing, but all of them have changed their constitution. Those that were once men only, you know, they all now admit women. The only exception now is the Garrick. My other thought is, well, why are we talking about it if we've got nothing more important going on?
Just to be frank, I genuinely could not care less if there is a club that I'm not allowed into because of my sex. I do, though, think that if you're going to start...
You're allowed in there. They let them in.
Yeah, but not as members.
Yeah.
But I do think if you're going to start, you know, having all of this kind of respect and all the rest of it for single-sex spaces for men, then you can't, as a society, allow the ridiculousness that goes on in female spaces when a man sticks a dress on and a wig maybe and a bit of lipstick if he's feeling bold and says that he's called Sharon and then wants to be allowed into that space, and then those establishments then buckle and let those men actually into things like changing rooms of women. That really, really annoys me.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Earlier on breakfast, holiday to Mexico and all this sort of thing. It's cheaper to get to those places than it is to get from London to Belfast, London to Glasgow.
15 hours more free childcare for 2-year-olds.
The entitlements that the government's putting in place are not matched by the availability of places.
Yes, there was anger, but I think there is still a real sense of confusion. What is and what isn't included in this bill?
They've got flags, so you can buy flags which are not Union Jack flags. Yeah. They're flags of those colours. So if you want to change the kit, that's one thing, but don't change people waving flags.
From 6, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back. The time is 4:23. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now let's bring you some breaking news now. And the UK government has summoned the Israeli ambassador over the death of 3 British aid workers in Gaza. World Central Kitchen confirmed 7 of its workers were killed last night when their car was struck by a missile. In addition to the 3 Britons, 8 workers from Poland, Australia and Palestine were killed, along with a dual US and Canadian citizen. Now, inflation in shop prices has dropped to its lowest since December 2021 as shoppers cut down on spending. Falling food costs and competition between retailers have prompted this sharp fall. So is the cost of living crisis for Brits finally easing? Well, joining me now is our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, with On the Money. Welcome to the show, Liam. Always an absolute delight. Liking the haircut there, mate, looking tidy. So listen, am I being a cynic by saying things getting not quite as expensive as quickly as before is the new good news?
Well, it's certainly decent news, Martin, that inflation has come down. It's now, these are unofficial numbers. This is the British Retail Consortium numbers, 1.3% during the year to March, I should say. That's down from 2.5% inflation during the year to February. Again, these are unofficial numbers from the British Retail Consortium. We're also seeing the energy price cap coming down from the 1st of April. That's fallen by about 12% to just under £1,700 a year. And it strikes me that we're now facing the first rate cut in June. I think interest rates will be cut from June. That's my current prediction, from 5.25%. So you're right. It's not as if prices are falling, but they're going up more slowly now than at any time than they have in the last 2 years. The beginning of the end, perhaps, of the cost of living crisis.
And Liam, you've been crying out for this kind of fiscal stimulus for so long in terms of interest rate cuts, because we can't keep singing hosannas about things not getting quite so pricey all along. Are you hopeful that the spring, the summer, will see that much-needed break in the clouds with the sun coming out, Liam?
I think it depends on the geopolitics, Martin. We've talked about this before. What do I mean by that? I mean, it depends on relationships between Russia and Ukraine, the knock-on implications for global energy prices, particularly oil and gas prices. It depends on how things pan out in the ongoing conflagration between Israel and Hamas in Palestine. A lot of it depends on global events. In general, it seems price pressures are easing in the UK. Wages are going up less quickly, but they're now going up more fast than the rate of inflation. So we've got real wage increases, but less inflation coming through wages. We've got fewer price pressures in the pipeline. Look, food is still expensive. Energy prices are coming down a bit. There is still a cost of living crisis for a lot of people, but it's not as bad as it was. And certainly the Tories, Rishi Sunak, will be hoping that this low inflation number, 1.3% from the British Retail Consortium, will be repeated when we get the official inflation numbers, paving the way for interest rate cuts to come soon. Hopefully, the Tories would say before a general election in the autumn, so they can get 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 interest rate cuts in from the Bank of England before an October election. We've had 2 tax reductions, lowering of national insurance rates from 12 to 10 and now 10 to 8%. The Tories want to get another tax cut in before the elections as well. So there's a lot of talk from the Prime Minister even today that he wants to wait for as long as possible before a general election. And that's because he hopes that interest rates will come down, not least as a result of this lower inflation number.
Well, Liam Halligan, you're normally right on all of these things. Mystic Liam, you got it right on inflation coming down.
Martin,
you got it right on interest rates.
And all I can hear in my ear is another interview.
OK, well, we're all done now. Thank you, Liam Halligan. Thanks for joining us with On the Money. Always a pleasure, my friend. Now, I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails this afternoon during the show already. And the thing that's really, really got you going is the Palestinian refugee resettlement scheme, a bit like the Ukraine scheme, but from Palestine. Lee says this: why? What's wrong with their Arab brothers taking them in? Carl echoes that, but the Arab nations won't take them in. I wonder why. And of course, we spoke to counter-terror experts earlier saying that oftentimes when this was allowed in countries such as Lebanon, civil war followed. Danny said, no, Europe took in millions of Ukrainian refugees because they're our neighbours and it was the right thing to do. But Arab nations should follow suit and take their neighbours in. We also got emails on obesity. We did a section earlier with Steve Miller saying 10 million people apparently are now addicted to fast food. Are they really? You're not quite believing that. In fact, you're quite cynical. James says this on the subject of obesity: I was once 25 stones. However, I went ahead with a gastric bypass and I lost 12 stones. However, this isn't a panacea for good health and mental health. Mary says this: there is no denying the obesity epidemic. Just go to any supermarket and you see mainly younger women dressed in clothes that are way too too tight with their stomachs hanging above their knees. They won't be fit to play with their grandchildren. Thank you, Mary, for sharing that touching vignette. Shane adds this: simple, stop shaming fat people directly and introduce a NHS levy tax on all fast food and junk food at the outlet where they were purchased. This tax will go directly to the NHS and not to the government pot. Quickly on the hate crime laws in Scotland. A lot of you get in touch about the clampdown on free speech in Scotland. Joan says this: people in Scotland had better unplug their smart speakers before saying anything. Big Brother might be watching you. And Melvin adds this: what happens in England if you do something the Scottish laws find criminal? Can they come and get you, or can they wait until you're in Scotland? It's a fantastic question, and if there are any legal eagles out there with the answer to that, let us know. J.K. Rowling, of course, is defying Humza Yousaf. She's saying, #arrest me. She's making the comments, and no doubt at some point she will go to Scotland. What will be her fate? Thanks for those emails, and please keep them coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com, of course, is the address. Now we'll discuss another woke rebrand of a flag. This time it's Team GB's Union Jack has turned pink and purple on a supporters' flag for this year's Olympics. Is the Union Jack now a union joke? A union woke, even? But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The top stories this hour: the Foreign Office says it summoned the Israeli ambassador to set out its unequivocal condemnation of the killing of 7 aid workers in Gaza, which included 3 British nationals. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, says officials are checking the incident thoroughly. The group killed were travelling in 2 armoured cars marked with the World Central Kitchen logo. The aid group claiming the attack was carried out despite them coordinating their movements with the Israeli military. Israel's Defence Minister says a joint situation room will now be opened with international groups to facilitate the safe delivery of aid with military cooperation. A 12-year-old child has been killed and 2 other children are in a serious condition after a shooting carried out by another child at a primary school in Finland. It's understood a permit for the handgun used belonged to a relative of the suspect. Police are saying a 12-year-old boy has admitted carrying out the shooting, but the circumstances of what exactly happened are not yet clear. And as you've been hearing, the Prime Minister is backing the Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling after she criticised a new hate crime law in Scotland. It came into effect yesterday and bans hatred against people on certain grounds. But the author says it risks silencing genuine debate on issues around gender and doesn't protect the rights of women or girls. Rishi Sunak has backed her concerns, saying that people shouldn't be criminalised for stating simple facts on biology. Those are your latest news headlines. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Polly. Now, Rishi Sunak has defended the government's new childcare policy as Labour says nurseries don't have enough staff to deliver on the plan. That rings with me. Same situation when my kids were young. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. There's some queues in Glasgow either side, looking slow of the M8 between Ibrox and Townhead, junction 23 to 15. A clockwise M60 starting to build from the Trafford Centre at 10 through towards Worsley at 13. Now 2 lanes are coned off. Southbound M3 Lightwater at 3 towards Fora to Camberley. A lorry fire means we're seeing delays building. A southbound M11 Harlow North 7A to junction 7. The earlier collisions cleared. All lanes open, but still very slow going. And in Dorset, the A352 closed both ways between Whitcomb and Broadmain and queuing. A lorry involved in a collision, and that's starting to cause congestion on that stretch of the A352 this afternoon as well. And for now, that's your very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
Shocking new study says that vaping might be linked to cancer. Not that shocking.
It found e-cigarettes can cause similar DNA changes to cells as smoking, leading experts to claim that vaping does not seem as harmless as originally billed.
So joining us now is Robert Sidebottom from the UK Vaping Industry Association. Good morning, Robert. Is this terrible news for your industry? I imagine you're going to try and defend the product still and say that there's still a lot more research to be done.
Well, I don't need to really defend the product because I think actually if you read the article and you read the detail in the article, I mean, it actually starts and it states with, while this doesn't mean that vaping has the same degree of cancer risks as smoking does, it implies that vaping may have negative health impacts. However, we've never said that vaping is completely risk-free. And we've always said that it is 95% safer than smoking, which it is. We accept that further research needs to be done. And actually, we welcome studies into the health impact of vaping, as we want to give every former smoker the full confidence that vaping is considerably safer than smoking. And that's the important message.
But that's about the former smokers. What about the young people who are taking up vaping, Robert? It's better not to vape. It's better not to vape at all, and we know why they take up smoking, because you lure them into your shops with silly flavours called bubblegum.
Well, we can get into the flavour debate. That's no problem at all, because adults like flavours. Particularly I love squashy sweets. These products, and let's be absolutely clear, are not for children. They are an age-gated product that are for adults only. And that is exactly who they should be sold to.
I'm so sorry, Rob, we've run out of time, but hopefully this research will show that they certainly are not for children.
Welcome back. It's 4:36. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, Rishi Sunak has defended the government's flagship childcare policy and dismissed concerns over whether the nursery sector has enough places and staff. And the Prime Minister visited a nursery in Hartlepool this morning to mark the first day when families in England benefited from 15 hours of taxpayer-funded care for 2-year-olds every week. Well, joining me now is GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, welcome to the show. This brings back memories of when my nippers were approaching this age. Back in the day, David Cameron offered 30 hours free care, Catherine, and guess what happened? All the nurseries were full because everybody had vouchers. I couldn't get a blooming place anyway. How are things going to be different this time around?
Yes, well, the Prime Minister is basically saying, have faith, it's all going to be OK. They're making very big promises because it's going to be, as of now, 15 hours of childcare per week for working families with a 2-year-old. But as of September, that age will be brought down to 9-month-old babies. And from next September, all preschool children from 9 months up will be able to get 30 hours of free childcare right through until they start school if their parents are working. So the story goes. That also potentially will save parents nearly £7,000 a year. But will there be enough places? As you've rightly said, it's one thing to promise these things. It's another thing for them to actually be delivered. There's a crisis, basically, in childcare provision, a recruitment crisis. They can't get enough staff. It's not particularly well paid. They can only look after a small number of children per person, and about a quarter of nursery providers thinking that they may cease trading in the next year. So it all sounds fabulous for working parents, but I think we will find out pretty quickly if the government's assurances that the places will be there actually turns out to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, it's the basics, isn't it, Catherine? It's supply and demand. If thousands and thousands and thousands of parents turn up clutching vouchers and there are only a small number of places, it stands to reason that the prices will go up, or they'll be full, or they'll have to open more nurseries, which costs money, which will drive prices up. I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but isn't this kind of doomed just to get stuck in the treacle?
Well, the government are issuing 150,000 codes, they say. Rishi Sunak was saying a little bit earlier on his visit that this is why the government are doing it in stages, not in one go, to allow the provision to increase gradually. But there are many, many anecdotes coming in of people who are simply not able to access this care. And bear in mind, we're only at the very beginning of it now. The national living wage is going up. I'm not sure whether that will be enough to deal with the problems, because fundamentally, nurseries saying the government are not funding this properly. But I think worth bearing in mind as well why the government are doing this. Two reasons. Votes. They would like to try to get young parents voting for them. I think the average age to start voting Conservative now is over 50. And the other thing, of course, is they want workers. They want parents back at work, earning money, paying taxes, contributing to the economy. We don't have a lot of growth. This is one way the government hopes that they might get it. And they're hoping that something like 60,000 people will be brought back into the workplace as a result.
Superb. Catherine Fawcett, I admire your optimism. Thanks for joining me on the show. And joining me now is Lydia Wright, who's the Managing Director at Little Pearls Nursery in Exeter. Welcome to the show, Lydia. So you've heard Rishi Sunak's plan. Operationally, will it work?
Oh, that's to be seen, isn't it, Martin? There's a lot of promises flying around at the moment. It's like was just said there's some issues around funding and staffing that really need to be looked at before we really get anywhere.
Yeah, because Lydia, I'm just saying, I well recall when a similar scheme came in with David Cameron, everyone went to the nursery clutching their vouchers, only to be told, well, there's thousands and thousands of parents just like you with free vouchers. The places are all full, and they were putting their prices up. So it doesn't actually seem to solve the issue. It's well-intentioned, but on the ground, parents still facing the same exasperations.
Yeah, I mean, we're thrilled for parents. As a parent myself, I'm really happy that working families have got a little bit more support. It's just what that looks like in the background are the issues, really. There's not, from what I can tell, a lot of spaces available. As a nursery, we are definitely, unfortunately, sending people away for certain places now, particularly as those inquiries start coming through for September already. We have some places that we just can't offer until this time next year, unfortunately, which is a lovely position to be in as a business, but we really don't want to be turning families away. So I'm really interested as to where these places are going to be coming from, really, and how we're going to staff it.
Yeah, and of course, Lydia, many parents watching, or many grandparents watching who become that service will know full well that oftentimes nursery places just takes up so much of your salary. It pays better to not go back to work. And isn't that the problem, Lydia? We seem to be stuck in this endless cycle. We want to empower mothers and fathers to get back into the workplace, but unless we fund it properly, which of course means more taxation, we're kind of stuck in a never-ending circle.
Yeah, we are. And it needs to be publicised correctly, because at the moment it's very much publicised as free childcare, which it isn't, because it quite frankly doesn't cover cost. We've been kind of lobbying about this for years. Unless it actually covers cost, it's not free. It's funded, and unfortunately it's up to the providers at the moment to negotiate that with the parents and explain exactly what it is. The government gives us a rate that's lower than the actual cost of quality early years education. So it's either up to the providers or for the parents to kind of fit the shortfall there. So it's either got to be advertised as funded childcare or subsidised childcare, or it needs to be covered at the appropriate cost and therefore can be advertised as free.
Of course, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Lydia Wright, the Managing Director at Little Pearls Nursery in Exeter. I wish you the very best with your business, and thanks to the service you do. You're a lifesaver, certainly, for when me and the missus were trying to get back to work. Now, coming up very shortly, we'll discuss another woke rebrand of a flag. This time, Team GB's Union Jack has turned pink and purple on a supporters' flag for this year's Olympics. Members of the public will give us their thoughts. Is this Union Jack a Union joke? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. Across some central southern parts, there will be a bit of sunshine tomorrow, but otherwise it's looking pretty wet, and there's some rain to come tonight as well. That's because we have an area of low pressure to the southwest of us, and that is driving a feature northwards as we go through the rest of today. So ending the day across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England on a mostly dry note, but rain in the southwest will feed its way across much of England, Wales and into Northern Ireland overnight, with some persistent rain continuing across eastern parts of Scotland, bringing a bit of hill snow over the higher ground here. Temperatures not dropping much for many of us because of the unsettled weather, although a touch of frost is possible across the far north of Scotland. Many areas then waking up tomorrow morning to a pretty wet start and staying wet across northern parts with some further, at times heavy and persistent rain. Further south though, a drier picture. Yes, there will be a few showers around, but we should also see some bright or sunny spells developing. In any sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs of around 16 Celsius, but colder further north and feeling it in the wet and the windy weather here. Later on, as we go through tomorrow afternoon into the evening, a swathe of more persistent rain is going to affect parts of Devon, Cornwall and into South Wales as well. Looking ahead through the rest of the week, and the unsettled picture does remain. In fact, it is likely to turn very windy by the end of the week, but temperatures rising could get to 20 Celsius by Saturday. Bye-bye.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:47. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now at 5 o'clock, we'll discuss whether ID cards could be the way to solve the migrant crisis because a former Labour Home Secretary, well, he's backing them. But first, let's bring you some breaking news. And Police Scotland say Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling's posts about the country's controversial new hate crime law are not criminal. Repeat, they are not criminal. The force said they received complaints regarding the writer's post on X, formerly known as Twitter, stating trans women are men and challenging police to arrest her for her views. But a Police Scotland spokesperson said this: "We have received complaints in relation to the social media post. The comments are not assessed to be criminal and no further action will be taken," which makes you ask the question, what are these laws for if those comments aren't a criminality? OK. Now to another rebrand of a flag which has caused more controversy after Nike changed the St George's Cross on the England football shirt. And this time Team GB's Union Jack supporters' flag has turned pink and purple for the Paris Olympics this year. And GB News has been out and about today to find out what the great British public thinks about this flag.
I think it's OK, but I still think that red, white and blue is really our colour.
I like it. I think it's modern.
I think that one's nicer. You've got to move with the times, haven't you?
It's time for a change because everything in life moves on and you have to adapt to what's going on. So, yeah, no, I'm looking forward to the Olympics and I'm looking forward to seeing our athletes and swimmers and everybody wearing it.
Great. Why not leave it as it is? It's, you know, our traditional flag. Why mess with it like the England football shirt? Just leave it alone.
That is the proper flag for our country, and that's what should be up.
Well, I think it's a bit weird they're changing it. The flag's the flag, isn't it? It's been there centuries, isn't it? So keep it the same.
I quite like it, but I think the red could be redder. Yeah, nothing really against it.
Team GB should be what the Union Jack in Great Britain, but to me that's not.
There you go, a mixed bag about this flag out and about. And joining me now is former Team GB sprinter Derek Redmond. Derek, a gold winner, a record breaker. Captain, what's your take on this flag? Some people are calling it a union joke.
I've not heard that, but I do like that. I mean, I'm not a fan of it. We are competing for Great Britain. The British flag is the colours that it is. You know, if you want to change anything and have an extra bit of representation, then do it in the vest, but leave the flag as it is. You know, you're representing Great Britain. I'm sure you can see behind me there's a picture of Usain Bolt. I'm sure Jamaica, when they come out of the Olympic Games, won't be coming out in purples, pinks and greens. They'll be coming out in their usual traditional colours. So for me, leave the flag as it is, and if you want to make any changes, change the actual, you know, the vest, the shirt, the singlet, the trunks, whatever people are using, depending on what sport they're playing. I just think that you are competing for Great Britain, and if you are, you know, a British representative, then we're representing the whole of Great Britain, whatever walk of life you're from.
Derek, I think you raised a fantastic point there. It seems to be, as we saw with the Nike shirts, the St George's Cross was changed. Now the Union flag is changed. It's seen as progressive, isn't it, to meddle with our great nation's flags? But I think you're dead right. The Jamaicans would never change their flags. The French would never change their flags. Do you think something pernicious is going on, Derek? Is this about meddling with our flags deliberately to try and wind us up?
I don't know, you know, and I'm all for moving forward and you know, and going with change. But as I say, you can do that with the strip, with the kit itself. Our flag is our flag. I'm sure if I change my number plates to purples and oranges and mauves and goodness knows what, the police will have something to say about it. I don't think I can get away with saying it's progressive. But I can paint my car any colour that I want, or spray it, I should say. So I'm not sure the reasons behind it. I would love to know the reasons behind it. And as I say, I'm all for moving forward. I'm all for progression. But we are representing Great Britain, you know, for as long as I've been alive, and for I don't know how long after I'm gone, our flag has been red, white and blue. The flag should be that colour, regardless to the size, where it's placed, and you know, have fun with the strip itself. Make that different. You know, I've got no issues with that, but the flag itself shouldn't change unless our flag actually changes.
And Derek, you're a medal winner. You know what it feels like to see that flag go up the pole. It must be the best feeling on the planet.
Well, it's not just the flag going up the pole. Which is the best feeling on the planet. It's actually having that flag on your chest as well, representing your country, running out onto the football pitch, the cricket pitch, the rugby pitch, whatever it is, the athletic track, walking out, standing on a podium, just about to dive into a pool. Having that Union flag on yourself is what you've worked for, you know, and it's the colours that it is the colours that it is. And when we're training in the middle of the winter and going for all those hard sessions, that's the image we have in our minds of that Union flag going up the pole, as you say, or wearing that vest, that shirt, that singlet with the Union flag or the St George's Cross on it in its original colours.
Well, I'll tell you what, Derek Redmond, I'm on the verge of standing up and belting out God Save the King. Thank you very much, mate, for that patriotic blast. Excellent stuff, and I wish you all the very best. The best of British former Team GB sprinter, Derek Redmond, a gold medal winner, a record breaker, a gentleman who's got that huge pride of having that flag on his chest and seeing it go with that flagpole. Derek, legend, mate, thank you very, very much for injecting some common sense into today's show. Now, a reminder of the story we broke a few minutes ago, and Police Scotland say Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling's posts about the country's controversial new hate crime law are not criminal. The force received complaints regarding the writer's posts on X, of course formerly known as Twitter, stating trans women are men and challenging police to arrest her for her views. We'll have more on that after this. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. First, it's time for your latest weather forecast with Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Across some central southern parts there will be a bit of sunshine tomorrow, but otherwise it's looking pretty wet and there's some rain to come tonight as well. That's because we have an area of low pressure to the southwest of us, and that is driving a feature northwards as we go through the rest of today. So ending the day across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England on a mostly dry note, but rain in the southwest will feed its way across much of England, Wales and into Northern Ireland overnight, with some persistent rain continuing across eastern parts of Scotland, bringing a bit of hill snow over the higher ground here. Temperatures not dropping much for many of us because of the unsettled weather, although a touch of frost is possible across the far north of Scotland. Many areas then waking up tomorrow morning to a pretty wet start and staying wet across northern parts with some further, at times heavy and persistent rain. Further south though, a drier picture. Yes, there will be a few showers around, but we should also see some bright or sunny spells developing. In any sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs of around 16 Celsius, but colder further north and feeling it in the wet and the windy weather here. Later on, as we go through tomorrow afternoon into the evening, a swathe of more persistent rain is going to affect parts of Devon, Cornwall and into South Wales as well. Looking ahead through the rest of the week, and the unsettled picture does remain. In fact, it is likely to turn very windy by the end of the week, but temperatures rising could get to 20 Celsius by Saturday. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Very slow for the M60 at the moment, either side of Worsley Junction 13. There was a collision, it's now cleared, but still big congestion on either side of the carriageway. Now the anti-clockwise M25, the exit slip to come off at South Mims, that's the A1M turn off Junction 23. That's part blocked, a vehicle undergoing a tyre change at the moment, and that's causing delays. Southbound M3, Lightwater Junction 3 down to Camberley at 4. Long delays and 2 lanes combed off. There's a lorry fire causing a fair amount of congestion so far this afternoon. And then finally on the southbound side of the M11 in Essex, there's queues for an earlier collision. It's just down towards the turn off there for Harlow North at Junction 7A. It's starting to improve though, all lanes are back open. And that's your latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for 2 worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. Today, with a huge increase in illegal migrants crossing the Channel so far this year, one former Home Secretary says ID cards could hold the key to solving the small boats crisis. And Police Scotland say J.K. Rowling's comments on social media are not criminal. They received complaints after the Harry Potter author wrote that trans women are men and challenged police to arrest her for her views. Well, I'm going to speak to a comedian who performed at an event in Edinburgh last night, a few hours after the country's controversial new hate crime laws came into force. And I don't think he got arrested either. And some Tories are already planning for life without Rishi Sunak. One group is said to want to replace him with a Liz Truss-style leader. Spoiler, it's not Liz Truss. That's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. As always, it's fabulous to have your company. We've had hundreds and hundreds of emails today in the show. We've covered obesity. Is it an addiction or simply poor behaviour? Should we accept a Ukrainian-style refugee plan but for Palestinians? And next, we'll be debating ID cards. Is it time to make them compulsory so we have a clue who's in our country arriving illegally in dinghies? They can walk into the country without any proof of who they are and we won't know where they're going to be. Is a 1990s-style ID scheme the way out of the mire? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com, with all of your opinions. But first, let's kick off this hour with your latest news headlines, and it's Polly Middlehurst.
Martin, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the top story from the GB Newsroom tonight is that the Foreign Office says it has summoned the Israeli ambassador to set out its unequivocal condemnation of the killing of 7 aid workers in Gaza, which included 3 British nationals. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, described the incident as tragic and unintended. The group killed were travelling in 2 armoured cars marked with the World Central Kitchen logo. The aid group claims the attack was also carried out despite them coordinating their movements with the Israeli military. Israel's Defence Minister says a new situation room will be opened now with international groups to facilitate the safe delivery of aid in future. Here, Rishi Sunak has called for a full investigation.
Shocked and saddened to hear the reported deaths of aid workers in Gaza. We're urgently working to confirm all the details, but my thoughts right now with their friends and family. They're doing fantastic work bringing alleviation to the suffering that many are experiencing in Gaza. They should be praised and commended for what they're doing. They need to be allowed to do that work unhindered, and it's incumbent on Israel to make sure that they can do that, and we're asking Israel to investigate what happened urgently, because clearly there are questions that need to be answered.
Now, as you've been hearing, comments about Scotland's new hate crime law posted to social media by the author J.K. Rowling are not criminal. That's according to Police Scotland in the last hour or so. The new law was introduced yesterday and seeks to ban hatred against people on certain grounds. But the Harry Potter author says it risks silencing genuine debate on issues around gender, as well as ignoring the rights of women and girls. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has backed her concerns, saying that people shouldn't be criminalised for stating simple biological fact. Shadow Minister Pat McFadden told GB News this morning that Labour has no plans to introduce anything similar.
We want proper enforcement of the anti-hate crime laws that are there and make sure that the right penalties are in place to protect people. We're not planning to legislate for new crimes in this area, and I don't think J.K. Rowling should be arrested.
Now, Finland will observe a day of mourning tomorrow after a 12-year-old child was killed and 2 others were seriously wounded in a shooting that was carried out by another child at a primary school north of Helsinki. It's understood a permit for the handgun that was used belonged to a relative of the suspect. Police say the 12-year-old boy has admitted carrying out the shooting, but the circumstances surrounding exactly what happened are still not clear. Sports brand giant Adidas will redesign its German football shirts featuring the number 44 amid concerns over a resemblance to the Nazi SS symbol. The new kits were launched last month ahead of Germany hosting the European Championship, but a historian flagged similarities for the logo with the SS, which was Nazi Germany's elite military guard under Hitler. The country's football association says it didn't spot the similarities when the design was first approved, but it will now be changed. Here at home, good news for house hunters. Mortgage approvals have hit a 17-month high, coinciding with a fall in house prices. According to the Bank of England, mortgage approvals rose to the highest level seen since the market turmoil sparked by Liz Truss's mini-budget. Meanwhile, house prices themselves fell by 2% in March. That means the average price of a home in Britain is now just over £261,000. The government's faced criticism today, though, over its new plan to expand funded childcare for working parents in the first week of it being rolled out across England. Meeting parents in Hartlepool this morning, the Prime Minister rejected claims that nurseries can't cope with increasing demand as a result of the new policy. He said the package of support for families has been introduced in stages to give time for more places to be made available at nurseries. And lastly, if you've ever gone incognito using the internet browser Google Chrome, your private information may have been stored anyway by the tech giant. But now, thanks to US court ruling, that might change. Google could be forced to delete all private user data which wasn't supposed to have been tracked. And despite the case being filed in the United States, the judgment also applies internationally, including here in the UK. Google has dismissed the merits of the case, saying it only involved old technical data that was never associated with individuals. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Polly. Now we've got loads to get through in this hour, so let's get cracking. And could ID cards be the way to finally solve the Channel migrant crisis? Well, it emerged yesterday that there's been an incredible 43% rise in the number of people illegally arriving in small boats this year alone. More than 5,000 migrants have crossed the Channel so far in 2024. Now, former Home Secretary Lord David Blunkett told The Times today, I would reintroduce the idea of ID cards because what will happen with the Rwanda scheme is organised criminals will tell migrants not to claim asylum. They'll say, well, we'll get you across to the UK and then ring this number, we'll get you a job and accommodation. And then they'll simply disappear into the sub-economy. And that's the worst of all worlds. And they'll be exposed to mass exploitation. And then that'll affect other people by undercutting genuine workers and also involve modern slavery. You can only solve that if you have a proper identity scheme. Now, this idea was originally floated in the 1990s, in 2001, beg your pardon, post 9/11. It was meant to be a way of tracking terrorists in the UK. It came in a voluntary basis for Brits, but became compulsory for foreign people here. But it was scrapped by the coalition in 2010. Could the idea work again in this day and age? Well, Lord Blunkett seems to think so, and so do you. We've had hundreds and hundreds of emails on this. I'm going to read out just a few of those now. Dave says this: ID cards should be essential. Most of the time you will not have to show it, but it will stop all the corruption in voting in the workforce. Police checks, I'm sure most people in this country would gladly accept them if they felt it was controlling our borders and knowing who is in our country. Linda adds this: make it a voluntary scheme for everybody, but if you opt out, then you cannot qualify for benefits or NHS services. Genuine asylum seekers will soon opt in, I guarantee it, and criminals and economic migrants will be opting out, and then we can arrest them and get them out of the country. Now, Bev says this: the British created ID cards in South Africa after the Boer War in 1902. Law stated everyone must carry them, and they still do. If you want to be safe in Britain, then we need to reintroduce these schemes sharpish. Now, earlier in the show, I talked about calls for Palestinian refugees and Gaza with family in this country to be allowed to move to the UK. Now, almost 60 groups, including the Refugee Council and Care for Calais, they want Home Secretary James Cleverly to start a Ukraine-style visa scheme. And let's go to a few emails on that story now. We've had absolutely hundreds. In fact, we've had over 1,000 emails on this, and it's fair to say it's very, very divided you. Toby says this: we've got enough problems in the UK without adding Palestinians access to the UK. You never know. Some of these could be Hamas terrorists. And in fact, we spoke to Philip Ingram, a former senior military advisor. He said precisely that. We simply would have no idea who is amongst these refugees, no matter how well-intentioned they were. Brian says this: the death of the aid workers in Gaza rests squarely with Hamas and the Palestinian people. They are the ones with blood on their hands. A few of you out there, they support this idea, though. They think it's the right thing for us to do. Rob says this: yes, it is the only decent humanitarian response, a true British value. Allow refugees from Palestine into this country. Let's rise above the morass. Meg adds this: we should show heart and lead the world by example, just as we did with Jewish refugees after World War II. But Peter says this: has this government lost its mind and any sense of responsibility for taking care of the British public? My family and I, and hundreds of people that we know all across my community, do not want any more refugees, economic migrants, illegal boat people, or any others allowed into the UK. Anne adds this: I'm all for this scheme, so long as these Palestinian refugees stay at the homes of Care for Calais staff. I think Anne there might have a tongue firmly in her cheek. Now let's get more on our top story. And Lord Blunkett says ID cards could solve the Channel migrant crisis. Well, joining me now to discuss this is the human rights lawyer, Shoaib Khan. Welcome to the show, Shoaib. So, David Blunkett, it's an idea from 2001. He's all for it because it will stop the economic migrants, the refugees, the asylum seekers, whatever you want to call them. It will stop them being forced into the black economy. It will stop them being forced into slavery, and it will protect their rights and keep everybody safe. On that basis, surely you must support it.
No, I don't. I mean, I have to say about David Blunkett, I mean, talk about being a one-trick pony. I mean, is this the only thing, every 10 years he reappears and this is the only thing on his mind? I mean, obviously, the plan failed abysmally even when he was in power, even as Home Secretary. Then the Tories sort of dabbled with it for a while. Obviously, the coalition government completely, they did away with it. So whatever, 10, 15 years later, I have no idea why the idea is, rearing its head again. But I just don't even understand, even from his point of view, or even people who might support ID cards in general. What's the idea? How would it stop the boats? How would it stop illegal immigration to the UK? Because, unless the plan is, we're going to Calais or France and giving ID cards to people there, so at least when they arrive in the UK, we know who they are. But otherwise, I'm not even sure, what's the benefit of it? People in the UK who are here lawfully documented people who work and live in the UK, they already have documents. We have passports, we have NI numbers, we have any documents we need to be living and working in the UK. So how is it going to solve how is it anything to do with the migration crisis?
Well, it could address a very real problem, Shoaib, and one that exists, and that is this. People are told routinely to throw their documents in the channel as they come over and then to invent a story about who they are. So surely having a mandatory ID scheme for anybody arriving in the country by those means would safeguard the British public. It will guarantee these people couldn't work illegally and protect the human rights of British citizens rather than continually protecting the rights of those who arrive to our shores illegally.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, I'm not sure. So are we saying that they need to bring their ID cards with them? I thought what David Blank is suggesting is that we need to be issuing people with ID cards in the UK. He's genuinely saying, again, we were just talking about, you were just speaking about Palestine, Ukraine, all those, Afghanistan. So are we genuinely saying if someone arrived from Palestine, with an ID card, we'd grant them asylum if someone turns up without an ID card? Or if a Ukrainian turned up without an ID card, would send them away or deport them? I mean, I think that's a ludicrous idea anyway. But I just don't see, especially considering, for instance, if we put this into effect for Palestine, are there authorities in Palestine right now issuing ID cards? I mean, how does any of that work?
It's a completely separate thing. The idea of a Palestinian refugee scheme isn't the same as what we're talking about here. People coming over the channel illegally, given a piece of paper proving who they are, which would protect, surely, the human rights of British citizens.
No, but where do they? That's what I'm saying. I mean, who are these people? They're mostly Afghans. They're mostly other countries. So is the Taliban giving out ID cards or pieces of paper proving who people are right now? How do we expect people who are in France and want to come to the UK? We expect them to go back to Afghanistan first, get your ID card made, and then you come back. I just don't see. I mean, even practically, let alone the human rights or civil liberties point of view, practically, what are we suggesting people do here? I just have no idea how we expect it to even work.
OK, well, if you don't know then I can't help you. Thank you very much, Sheeb Khan, for joining us on the show, human rights lawyer. Thank you very much. Now, 3 British aid workers have been killed after an Israeli airstrike in Gaza. Rishi Sunak says questions need to be answered after this horrific incident, and the Israel Defence Forces has expressed the deepest condolences to the families of 7 people who died last night. Well, joining me now is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, what's the latest on this tragedy?
Well, the confirmation now that those among the 7 people that were killed are 3 British nationals, confirmed by this charity, World Central Kitchen, who've been working at the request of the Israelis, actually, in Gaza for quite a number of months now. And this is significantly embarrassing and very uncomfortable for the Israelis because they have such a good working relationship with this charity. And that's because, of course, the Israelis do not have a good working relationship with the United Nations aid agency in Gaza, UNRWA, who they claim have employed some 2,000 members of Hamas, have also employed people from Hamas that were actively involved in the terrorist atrocities of the 7th of October. That relationship is completely broken down. The Israelis would like to expel this UN aid agency from Gaza and have been encouraging outside NGOs and charities like the World Central Kitchen to come in there and to work. And they have been liaising every day, they say, with the Israeli military about where to go, what routes they're taking to try to avoid what we saw taking place last night. They say, according to the Israeli Prime Minister, an unintended missile strike that is now part of a deep investigation by the Israeli military to determine exactly what went wrong. Well, we heard from the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak a little earlier today. This was his reaction to that tragic event last night.
I'm shocked and saddened to hear the reported deaths of aid workers in Gaza. We're urgently working to confirm all the details, but my thoughts right now with their friends and family. They're doing fantastic work, bringing alleviation to the suffering that many are experiencing in Gaza. They should be praised and commended for what they're doing. They need to be allowed to do that work unhindered, and it's incumbent on Israel to make sure that they can do that, and we're asking Israel to investigate what happened urgently, because clearly there are questions that need to be answered. You know, our view is long-standing that Israel has both the intention and the ability to comply with international humanitarian law. I've made that very clear to Prime Minister Netanyahu whenever I've spoken to him. There have been too many civilian deaths in Gaza. Of course, we want to see an immediate humanitarian pause so that we can get the hostages out and more aid into the region.
And in the meantime, we have an additional headache on top of a deepening crisis in Gaza in humanitarian terms, because this charity at the centre of this tragic incident last night, World Central Kitchen, has now suspended its operations in Gaza, a charity that in recent months has handed out some 42 million meals to Gaza's citizens. So absolutely vital to the humanitarian effort in this enclave. And not just them, another US charity has suspended operations. So the Israelis are speaking to these charities as a matter of urgency to try to get better working practices in place to try to ensure there's no repeat of the horrific events that unfolded yesterday evening.
Thank you, Mark White, for that update on the aid workers killed in Gaza. Thank you very much. Now, it's our biggest giveaway of the year so far. Your chance to win a £10,000 Greek cruise for two, 10 grand in cash and a whole host of luxury travel gifts on top. Your 2025 holiday could be on us here at GB News, and here's all the details that you need to enter.
You could win our biggest prize giveaway so far. First, there's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Fill your boots. Now, Police Scotland says that J.K. Rowling's comments about trans women are not criminal under the country's new hate crime laws. Next, I'll speak to a comedian who went up there to try and get arrested himself. Did he succeed? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's a remarkable story, isn't it?
Amazing.
Extraordinary. And also, she was unflappable, apparently, the Princess Royal.
She's
just
brilliant.
refused to get out of the car and said, I'm not going anywhere. Extraordinary. Well, Jim Beaton was awarded the George Cross for protecting the Princess, and delighted to say joins us now, along with the former head of Royalty Protection, Di Davis. Jim, you won't remember, but I met you some time ago at the Imperial War Museum when Princess Anne was opening an exhibition to do with the George Cross, and you were there reunited with her. And you told me then what great admiration you had for the Princess, cool under fire, but you didn't do so badly yourself.
It was probably my job. And also, I had a wee bit of police training, not very much, but a little bit, whereas Princess Anne had nothing. And yet, the way she displayed it, you would have thought she'd been highly trained to deal with any type of that situation.
Even though you'd had some training, you took 3 bullets for the princess. You effectively stood between her and a deranged gunman.
Well, I was supposed to be a protection officer, really, so I just tried to fuddle about. You must remember that back in 1974, there was no communication, and we were extremely lucky that Michael Hills, who was outside Clarence House and nearby, had got one of the fast police radios, or radios on his shoulder, so he was able to send a message out. Otherwise, we would have just been relying on the good old public to phone in and say there's something happening.
Yeah.
So times have changed drastically.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. The time is 5:25. I'm Martin Daubney and this is GB News. Now, later this hour, I'll tell you why we could have, can you believe this, hosepipe bans this summer. And that's despite the fact that we've just had the wettest 18 months since records began, up to my neck in bog. And yet, we might have to switch off the hose pipes come the summer, of course. Now, moving on, Police Scotland say Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling's posts about the country's controversial new hate crime laws are not criminal. The force said they received complaints regarding the writer's posts on X, of course formerly known as Twitter, stating trans women are men and challenging police to arrest her for her views. But a Police Scotland spokesperson said, "We have received complaints in relation to the social media post. The comments are not assessed to be criminal and no further action will be taken." Well, to mock the new law being introduced last night, some GB News comedians went to Edinburgh. However, their night was rudely interrupted by an appearance from the hate monster.
Before you laugh at a joke tonight, ask yourself the following questions. 1. Does the joke avoid offensive material? 2. Is the comedian a representative of a marginalised group? 3. Can you be absolutely sure the comedian has never said or done anything problematic?
And I suspect that was the only 20 seconds we were able to show through cleanliness reasons on the show. But anyway, joining me now to discuss this is the comedian and GB News presenter, Josh Howie. Josh, so the new laws came in. You guys from Comedy Unleashed steamed up to Scotland, presumably trying to break every law possible and to get the police provoked. What happened?
Well, first of all, lots of people laughed. That was actually J.K. Rowling who was in the costume that we just saw. And it was, you know what? We went up, we did our normal jokes that we would do in regular sets. But the point was to take a stand and not to incite hatred, but to see where this line was. Because before, in the last few weeks, we've heard about how the police have received training to go into comedy clubs and to go into theatres and to make a call about whether something is offensive or not. But where is the line? That's the point.
And Josh, without wishing to go full Godwins and mention Adolf Hitler, I'm afraid I'm going to do it, because the kind of countries that had censorship on humour were places like Hitler's Germany, or places like Kim Jong-un's North Korea, where there are state-approved jokes. Why on earth, in the United Kingdom in 2024, is the Scottish Government going down the route of trying to criminalise jokes?
I know. I mean, especially the home of Enlightenment, the home of the Edinburgh Fringe, one of the greatest comedy festivals in the world. But we saw it a couple of years ago. We saw Jerry Sadowitz, who's a fantastic comic, getting literally his shows cancelled up there. We saw a bunch of comedians just kind of doing nothing about it. And the irony is that people, what they do for kindness, or they see it as being a moral virtue, can of course be turned on them. That's the whole thing about free speech, is free speech for everyone, not just the people that I agree with. And when it comes down to this law, which really makes it about offence being taken and not given, then it's just about the individual. And anybody can use anything that anybody ever says online or in person or in a comedy club. And if they in any way take offence to it or pretend to take offence to it, you can get the police to look into it, which is madness. The fact that J.K. Rowling, who is probably Scotland's greatest living export, had to take a stand in this way and protect women, mostly for stating biological fact, to protect their rights. I mean, what a waste of police time today. They're probably going through these tweets and finding out if she committed an actual offence for stating biological truth.
Yeah, and it begs the question, Josh, if J.K. Rowling, the highest profile provocateur of these new laws, specifically and deliberately laid down things that she felt would get her arrested, and then they said they're not criminal anyway, what's the blooming point of these laws?
Of course, it's virtue signalling. But the scary thing is it's virtue signalling that is in law. There is this idea now that by calling their bluff, that other people, other women who don't have her profile or the resources that she has, can now use this as a defense. They can also say a male rapist is not a woman, is a male rapist. So what she's done was brave and courageous, and to take that stand, to put herself at risk. And hopefully that will extend. And the idea, I guess, of us going up there was to do the same thing, to go up, to tell jokes, to be funny, not to be hateful. But comedy is always about provoking and pushing and needling and pointing out hypocrisy. And there may well be some people who that antagonizes because you're saying something that they don't like. They don't agree with your view. But that's very different from being hateful. My job is to make people laugh, not in this interview, but, at nighttime.
Yeah, Josh, I was about to ask you, are there any jokes that you could tell us on this show that wouldn't get me immediately fired? Be careful, I've got 2 hungry children, that would contravene these laws that you're able to tell on daytime TV, or am I just inviting disaster here?
You're absolute, because I work for GBNews. I'm going to get fired as well. I've got 5 kids to feed. Forget your 2 kids. But, if people want to come along, there's another Comedy Unleashed in London at Backyard Comedy Club. I think next Tuesday. It's every month. There's one in Leeds. They're looking now at doing one in Edinburgh. And the reality is it isn't different stuff to what you would see at any other comedy night. But here, you're actually just freer to say this stuff. You don't have to self-censor, which is where things have been going for the last 5 years or so.
Superb. Josh Howie, thanks for joining us, thanks for making me smile, and thanks for not getting both of us sacked. What a double whammy that would have been. Josh Howie, always an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much, mate.
Thanks.
Now, there's still lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, and the UK could be set for a hosepipe ban this summer, despite the wettest winter on record, with scientists saying it's because we haven't built any reservoirs in the past 3 decades. What a bunch of drips. But first, here's your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
The top stories this hour. The Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, says Israel must make major changes to ensure the safety of aid workers in Gaza after 3 British nationals were among 7 killed in an airstrike. The Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, described the incident as tragic and unintended. The group killed were travelling in 2 armoured cars marked with the World Central Kitchen logo. The aid group claims the attack was carried out despite them coordinating their movements with the Israeli military. Well, now Israel's defence minister says a new situation room will be opened with international groups to facilitate the safe delivery of aid. Comments about Scotland's new hate crime law posted to social media by author J.K. Rowling are not criminal, according to Police Scotland. The new law was introduced yesterday and seeks to ban hatred against people on certain grounds. But the Harry Potter author says it risks silencing genuine debate on issues around gender, as well as ignoring the rights of women and girls. And a 12-year-old child has been killed and 2 other children are in a serious condition after a shooting carried out by another child at a primary school in Finland. It's understood a permit for the handgun belonged to a relative of the suspect. Police are saying a 12-year-old boy has now admitted carrying out that shooting, but the circumstances surrounding exactly what happened aren't yet clear. And mortgage approvals have hit a 17-month high, coinciding with a fall in house prices. Approvals rose to the highest level since the market turmoil sparked by Liz Truss's mini-budget in September 2022. Meanwhile, house prices fell by 2% in March. It means the average price of a home in Britain is now just over £260,000. That's your headlines. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan that QR code on the screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Shall we check on the numbers for you? Well, the pound will buy you $1.2572 and €1.1678. The price of gold is £1,795.58 an ounce. And the FTSE 100 has closed for the day today at 7,935 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Paul. Now, I've had hundreds of emails today, and the topic of identity cards has really got you going. Stuart says this: I've always been against ID cards before, and I certainly don't trust Tony Blair as far as I can throw him. But now it seems to me that it's essential that we know who is in this country. No identity card, or they should be deported immediately. David adds this quickly: what a surprise. The human rights lawyer does not support the use of ID cards. Pity he is not making the same case about the border checks to enter the EU, where you have your fingerprints taken and also facial recognition technology. Well, joining me now is Bev Turner, who's standing in tonight for Michelle Dewberry on Jubes & Co, 6 till 7 this evening. Bev, always a joy to see you. What's on your menu?
Evening, Martin. Well, we're going to be carrying on this conversation that you've just started then about free speech in Scotland and this absolutely lamentable bill from the SNP. We've got Peter Edwards in and Henry Hill. We're going to be talking about that. And then also double council tax for second homes. Is that going to be good for rural areas particularly, or is it a penalty, a punishment on people who just want to work hard and aspire to do better? Is it any wonder, topic 3, that Generation Z don't want to go to work? Maybe we've killed the idea that work is a good thing for that generation. Would you employ somebody who is Gen Z, as the kids mentioned it? And also, if you're going to Tenerife, you might get there to find there's some protests going on against British holiday makers, because apparently all we want to do in Tenerife is drink beer and eat burgers, and the locals are not happy about it. We're going to be having a special appearance from one holiday maker in Tenerife, our very own Michelle Dewberry from a Sun Lounger, to find out if the stereotype is true. That's me on Jubes & Co from 6.
Bev Turner sounds superb. And what's wrong with eating burgers and drinking loads of booze on holiday? Isn't that the point? Bev, that looks great. Superb menu, 6 till 7. That's Bev Turner standing in for Jubes & Co straight after me. Looks great. Now, we're still waiting to find out when the next general election will be, but the Tories are already looking ahead to how they'll react to a defeat. And today it's claimed one group wants to install a Liz Truss-style candidate to replace Rishi Sunak if they lose power. But spoiler alert, it's not Liz Truss. We'll find out from the leader of the Popular Conservative movement next who it might be. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Cheshire for Central Expressway, the A533. That's been closed through Runcorn heading north at the junction of Bridgewater Expressway, while emergency repair works are getting underway. In southeast London, the South Circular is closed southbound through Eltham, just off the A2 at the Wellhall roundabout at the scene of an accident. Long queues heading away from London through Surrey down the M3. Now, 2 out of the 4 lanes are still closed from junction 3 to 4 between the Bagshot and Camberley exits. That was after a lorry caught fire with queues back towards the M25. On the M27 in Hampshire, 1 lane's blocked westbound at junction 3 north of Southampton. The lane's also closed on the Exeter Slip Road where a vehicle broke down. And there are delays of an hour and a half on train services between London Euston and Watford Junction because of problems with the signals. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Is the brand of toothpaste super important here, or is it more about the toothbrush? Because I was told a long time ago by my dentist, electric toothbrush, Pip, that is the way to go.
You're exactly right. I mean, the action of mechanically removing plaque, so using a brush, is much more effective than the brand of toothpaste itself. But in terms of the ingredient in toothpaste that we're looking for, it's something called fluoride. And fluoride is essential to help remineralize and strengthen our teeth. It's really important to use a toothpaste with fluoride. And in terms of brushing, using an electric toothbrush is just much easier. You know, you're brushing your teeth first thing in the morning, last thing at night. You're going to be a bit tired in those times. So using an electric toothbrush, you just hold it against your tooth and gum and it does all the work for you. So it's just much easier in my opinion.
But you have to use your electric toothbrush properly.
You're exactly right. Yeah, there is a technique of actually brushing your teeth, although it sounds really simple. With an electric toothbrush, you have to hold it against the tooth and the gum. Ideally, you want a pressure sensor in that toothbrush so you know exactly when you're pressing too hard. But if you're using a manual toothbrush, you need to move it around and small circular motions. But actually what I see is people who use manual toothbrushes, they tend to over scrub and over brush, which can actually lead to gum recession and your enamel thinning long term.
Sometimes I will get up in the morning and I will have breakfast and then I'll brush my teeth. Is that wrong?
Unfortunately, that's wrong. So the best time to brush your teeth is first thing in the morning, as soon as you wake up. If you're brushing after you eat and after breakfast, you're brushing your teeth in that weakened acidic state. So your teeth are actually under attack and they're much more vulnerable.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:41. We're on the final furlong. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, reports suggest the plan has been launched to install a Liz Truss-style Tory leader by the Popular Conservatives group. The Popcons, as they call themselves, are movements aiming to restore democratic accountability and deliver popular Conservative policies, have reportedly devised a plan to introduce a future Tory leader aligned with Liz Truss's economic views. This comes after the probability of a Conservative defeat has intensified after continued polls suggest the likelihood of a very heavy loss indeed. Well, joining me now to discuss this is GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. So, Catherine, the Popcons are proposing a Liz Truss-style leader, but presumably it's not Liz Truss.
No, even Liz Truss would not presume that realistically she was going to be made Conservative Party leader again after her brief 7 weeks as Prime Minister. But what about perhaps somebody like the former Home Secretary, Priti Patel? She is popular on the right of the party. She's been making a lot of friends across the party. Recently, she's been going a little bit under the radar, but she is seen definitely as a contender if or when, as most people expect, the next election is lost. But of course, the Conservatives haven't lost the next election yet. So in some ways, people like William Hague saying this is really not very helpful at all. What we should be doing is looking united and trying to win. But of course, many of them think that it is already lost. And Judging by the poll that came out at the weekend, the MRP poll that suggested the Tories might only be left with 98 seats, they may not have that much choice into who to go for because, for example, Penny Mordaunt, very popular front runner for the leadership, predicted to lose her seat under that model. Ditto Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary. Ditto James Cleverly, the Home Secretary. Kemi Badenoch looks set to hang on in Saffron Walden, but according to another poll, she would be even less popular with voters than any of the alternatives. So let's see what happens, but certainly some plotting around Priti Patel specifically.
Catherine Forza, excellent as ever, and joining me now to discuss this is the director of PopCon, Mark Littlewood. Mark, welcome to the show. Catherine Forza there talking about the plotting, and of course, Mark, all eyes now on post-general election, the expected forest fire to come. Tell us, who would the Trust-style leader be? What values would they have, and how would they be selected?
I can't really answer your first question, Martin, but I can answer your second and your third question. Okay. What PopCons are pushing for is that we need a Conservative Party that understands we need massive institutional reform in Britain in order to make the sort of things that Conservatives want, deregulation, tax cuts, a slimmer, more efficient state, possible and viable. Unless we do things like scrap the OBR and pull out of the European Convention of Human Rights, then actually fiscal policy is never going to be Conservative. Immigration policy is going to be nearly impossible for any government to administer. So we need huge institutional reform. That's our pitch. Who is going to step up to that plate? Well, we've just heard your earlier discussion, fascinating. Priti Patel is definitely one of the people mentioned, Jacob Rees-Mogg conceivably as well, but there could be sundry others. And in terms of the personality, Martin, the question I said I wouldn't answer, I would just say this. As a betting man, the person who goes on to lead the Conservative Party is usually a 50-to-1 shot or longer a year before they become Tory leader. In fact, as a political nerd myself, I was not so long ago rewatching the October 1974 general election coverage. Margaret Thatcher was 50-to-1 to be the next Conservative Party leader. She became the next Conservative Party leader and then obviously went on to be one of our great post-war prime ministers. The process is pretty simple. Now, I'm rather with William Hague. I'm not trying to get rid of Rishi Sunak. I think this plotting and shenanigans is very detrimental to the Conservative cause. So I wish him every success. I hope he wins the next election. But in the scenario in which he doesn't, which is what the polls are predicting, the process would be as follows, that if the Conservative leader stands down, which you would kind of expect might happen if a Conservative Prime Minister is indeed defeated by the electorate, hopefully not by his own side, but only by the electorate, then you would need 1/3 of the remaining Conservative MPs to nominate a candidate to get them on the ballot paper, because you whittle it down to 2 from the parliamentary party, and then a majority of grassroots members, rank and file members of the Tory party to vote for that winner. We've been through this process a number of times over the past few years. Some might say rather too many times, but that would be the process. But again, I'm rather with William Hague. I mean, if Rishi Sunak were to run on the PopCon platform, I think he'd be in with a fighting chance. That we need serious change to the institutional structure of the United Kingdom in order to bring about what most voters want, a successful immigration policy, a less burdensome government, and rather lower taxes. But you've got to will the means, not just the ends. So I hope that Rishi Sunak is the leader of the Tory party that steps up and does this. You know, but if not, if the Conservatives lose, which is what the opinion polls suggest, badly from my perspective, that will be the process we go through.
OK, Mark Littlewood. And just for those out there listening, 50-to-1 shots include Grant Shapps, Michael Gove, Jeremy Hunt, Andrea Jenkins, Jacob Rees-Mogg and Liz Truss. Nigel Farage, he'd be a longer shot, would he?
Oh, well, that's really interesting. I mean, Nigel, a GB News presenter like yourself, Martin, he's keeping us guessing, isn't he? He's being his usual teasing self. We don't quite know whether he'll run for the Reform Party. We don't quite know whether he might in future join the Conservative Party, but probably the most influential character in British politics over the last 15 years, and now definitely the most intriguing character over the next 15 months or so. What Nigel Farage decides ultimately to do, I think, could be an extremely influential impact on the next general election and what happens next.
OK, we have to leave it there. That's the director of Popcorn, Mark Littlewood. And I just found out Nigel Farage is actually 25 to 1, so he's half the odds of all those names I just mentioned. Stranger things happen. Mark Littlewood, always a pleasure. Thanks for your time joining us on the show. Now, don't go anywhere, because we could be set for a summer hosepipe ban this summer, even though we've been up to our necks in rain in the entire winter, the wettest winter on record. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. Across some central southern parts, there will be a bit of sunshine tomorrow, but otherwise it's looking pretty wet, and there's some rain to come tonight as well. That's because we have an area of low pressure to the southwest of us, and that is driving a feature northwards as we go through the rest of today. So ending the day across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England on a mostly dry note, but rain in the southwest will feed its way across much of England, Wales and into Northern Ireland overnight, with some persistent rain continuing across eastern parts of Scotland, bringing a bit of hill snow over the higher ground here. Temperatures not dropping much for many of us because of the unsettled weather, although a touch of frost is possible across the far north of Scotland. Many areas then waking up tomorrow morning to a pretty wet start and staying wet across northern parts, with some further, at times heavy and persistent rain. Further south though, a drier picture. Yes, there will be a few showers around, but we should also see some bright or sunny spells developing. In any sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs of around 16 Celsius, but colder further north, and feeling it in the wet and the windy weather here. Later on, as we go through tomorrow afternoon into the evening, a swathe of more persistent rain is going to affect parts of Devon, Cornwall and into South Wales as well. Looking ahead through the rest of the week, and the unsettled picture does remain. In fact, it is likely to turn very windy by the end of the week, but temperatures rising could get to 20 Celsius by Saturday. Bye-bye.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:51. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, can you believe it? We could be set for a hosepipe ban this summer, despite having had the wettest winter on record. Experts say this is because no major reservoirs have been built in Britain in the past 30 years, meaning that water is not being stored properly. Well, I can now get the view of meteorologist and friend of the show, Jim Dale. Jim, why are we so terrible at planning for absolutely inevitable things? Like we can't store water when there's loads of it and use it when there's not much of it.
Yeah, it's... Well, good afternoon, first of all, Martin. You're right in terms of the disability of this country, and maybe other countries as well, to do the right thing by what we would call the basics of life. Can we say that? Water usage, because that's about where we are with it. Now, look, this is a bit of a double whammy. So the first part of it is the infrastructure itself. You've mentioned the lack of reservoirs. That may well be true. It probably is true as the population has increased. The reservoirs haven't. And at the same time, I'm not sure that the leakage problem's got any better either. So just as there's a sewage problem, there's a leakage problem, and that's your first side of it. So I guess that goes down to back down to the government and to water companies themselves. The second one, you've kind of mentioned it in a way, and that's the climate, or at least weather per se, in terms of what it's doing. So yeah, you're right. October 2022 to March 2024 figures have just been released, and England has had its wettest 18-month period since 1836. Who would have guessed that? Because exactly what climatologists have been saying that we're destined for during the cooler months of the year, and that this would happen. And presto, it's happened. So you get that. Then we move into a summer situation later, not yet, where we're supposed to get the exact opposite. By that I mean drought, soaring temperatures, massive evaporation rates. So you go from the feast, proverbially speaking, to the famine, and that's why this call has been made. I think it came out of the Times actually, but whoever's made the call, that's why they're making it. Whether it will happen this year, I'm not so sure. It will depend on how this summer bats out, how we actually get there, and what actually occurs. But I should say now, we are slightly on our own. By that I mean northwestern Europe in terms of enduring cool, wet weather, because a lot of other places are seeing extremely hot weather, record temperatures, even for this time of year.
Okay, Jim, I'm afraid we're gonna have to leave it there, Jim. I thought you'd blame on climate change rather than just getting a bigger bucket to store all this water we've got now. Thank you very much. That's it from me, Jubes & Co. with Bev Turner is up next. Don't forget, join us from 6 a.m. on breakfast. That's followed by Britain's Newsroom, 9:30, and then Tom and Emily at 12 till 3. I'm back tomorrow at 3 p.m. I'm Martin Daubney. First, it's time for your weather with Alex Burkill.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your latest GB News weather update, brought to you by the Met Office. Across some central southern parts, there will be a bit of sunshine tomorrow, but otherwise it's looking pretty wet, and there's some rain to come tonight as well. That's because we have an area of low pressure to the southwest of us, and that is driving a feature northwards as we go through the rest of today. So ending the day across parts of Northern Ireland, Northern England on a mostly dry note, but rain in the southwest will feed its way across much of England, Wales and into Northern Ireland overnight, with some persistent rain continuing across eastern parts of Scotland, bringing a bit of hill snow over the higher ground here. Temperatures not dropping much for many of us because of the unsettled weather, although a touch of frost is possible across the far north of Scotland. Many areas then waking up tomorrow morning to a pretty wet start and staying wet across northern parts with some further, at times heavy and persistent rain. Further south though, a drier picture. Yes, there will be a few showers around, but we should also see some bright or sunny spells developing. In any sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs of around 16 Celsius, but colder further north and feeling it in the wet and the windy weather here. Later on, as we go through tomorrow afternoon into the evening, a swathe of more persistent rain is going to affect parts of Devon, Cornwall and into South Wales as well. Looking ahead through the rest of the week, and the unsettled picture does remain. In fact, it is likely to turn very windy by the end of the week, but temperatures rising could get to 20 Celsius by Saturday. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems in North Yorkshire do continue north of Thirsk. The A19 remains closed both ways. Between Osmoveley and the Northallerton turn-off, a collision that happened around 4 o'clock continues to be investigated. In south-east London, meanwhile, the South Circular at Eltham is shut southbound off the A2 following an accident. Long queues of well over an hour continue heading away from London through Surrey down the M3. The motorway is down to a single lane from junction 3 to 4 between the Bagshot and Camberley exits. Recovery works underway after a lorry caught fire. In Dorset, southeast of Dorchester, the A352 shut between Broadmain and Whitcomb after a lorry struck a telegraph pole, bringing cables down. And disruption on trains between London Euston and Watford Junction because of these problems with the signals, also affecting overground trains which aren't running from London Euston to Kilburn High Road. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For a chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB0